Chapter 386. The next day the sun had already risen high in the sky, but Xianxia was still sleeping soundly on the bed. He had been flying non-stop for the past few days, and he was indeed a little tired. Normal cultivators would probably meditate to recover, but he preferred the most primitive way of resting: sleeping. Lying on the bed with his legs spread out was also a kind of happiness. Dong dong dong. In his dream he was still in his previous life, and he was discussing physiological problems with a few blonde and blue-eyed ladies. Unfortunately, he was awakened by a series of knocks on the door. He got up and looked around, and he couldn't help but sigh slightly. As expected, he was dreaming. The era of four wheels was gone forever. Dong dong dong. The knocks on the door continued, and Xianxia immediately shouted, "Who is it? Who is it? Why are you knocking on the door so early in the morning? Don't you know that you're sleeping?" He got off the bed unhappily and got up to retract all the black fiend traps that he had set up around him into his body. He had no choice but to do this. Often, people who schemed against others were also afraid of being schemed against by others. Back then he had schemed against Lu Jingguang here. Now that he was living here, he was also worried that he would be schemed against by others. After all, he had offended too many people. He had originally wanted to retreat to Utopia to rest, but he was a little worried about leaving Ziyi, who was as innocent as a piece of white paper, here. Although Ziyi's cultivation was much higher than his, he was still a little worried. Speaking of which, he didn't know who was protecting who. He walked to the door and pulled it open. Just as he was about to curse, he saw Ziyi standing outside the door with her hands behind her back. She had an obedient expression, and there was a hint of a fawning expression on her face. This was unprecedented. Needless to say, she was the one who knocked on the door. Xianxia swallowed back his curses and asked suspiciously, "Why are you knocking on my door so early in the morning?" "It's not early. It's already noon. Didn't someone ask you to go to the Cultivation Alliance last night?" Ziyi asked. Xianxia rolled his eyes, turned around and went back to his room. As he walked, he said, "In their eyes we're just two lousy loose cultivators. Why are we involved in that? They have their meeting and we just have to take care of ourselves." He walked to the side of the bed, tilted his body and fell back down. In fact, he really wanted to get involved. In his words, the more people there were, the more opportunities there were to get rich. But when he thought that Yen Bugue had brought a group of people and had a grudge against him, he decided that it was better to avoid the brunt of the conflict. He did not want to be the one who challenged the Cultivation Alliance. That would not be pleasant. Ziyi entered the room and said, "But there are people from the four great clans waiting for you downstairs. They say they want to wait for you to go with them." "The four great families." Xianxia crawled up and asked, "How did you know? You went down alone?" Ziyi stuttered and said, "Didn't you say it's a waste not to eat something that doesn't cost money? I think the food in this restaurant is quite delicious, so I went down to order some food by myself. It just so happens that the people from the four major families are waiting for you downstairs. I'll help them ask you after I finish eating." "Wouldn't it be a waste not to eat it?" Xianxia was startled. It seemed that he really did say that to her. She had a strong learning ability. He couldn't sleep anymore. He used the water spell, and a stream of clear water came out of Xianxia's palm. One stream went into his mouth to clean, and the rest was used to wash his face. After washing, the turbid water gathered into a ball. Xianxia opened the window, waved his hand, and the water turned into an arrow and shot out. As for where it would land, he was too lazy to think about it. In the end, Ziyi was completely dumbfounded. There was no one downstairs. They were probably all at the Cultivation Alliance. The four great clans sent 8 people. The 4 elders were Bai Shan, Tan Huazong, Jing Xingping and Wu Anfeng. The 4 of them were at the middle stage of tribulation passing. Except for the elder from the Wu clan who looked familiar, Xianxia did not know any of them. The remaining 4 people were old acquaintances. They were the first successors of the 4 great clans, Bai Zizong and the other 3. When the 8 of them saw Xianxia, they all bowed and said, "Mr. Yu. No need to be so polite, no need to be so polite." Xianxia smiled and waved his hand. He turned around and said to Ziyi, "Go, get me the food you had this morning." Ziyi didn't say anything and went straight to the counter to order. The shopkeeper smiled and nodded, but his smile seemed a little unnatural. "Brother Bai, you guys are here too?" As soon as Xianxia said this, Bai Zizong and the other 3 quickly said, "We don't dare." Now that the seniority between them was different from before, the 4 of them didn't dare to call him brother anymore. Moreover, there were 4 elders beside him. It wasn't the right time to talk about this in front of everyone. Xianxia looked at the 4 of them and asked, "What do you want from me?" The four elders looked at each other and nodded. Bai Shan, the elder of the Bai clan, stood up and replied, "After the four great clans received the Cultivation Alliance's notice, they sent us here overnight. We learned that Sir is in the 100 Flowers Valley and has joined the Cultivation Alliance. Before we left, the elders of the four great clans told us that if Sir needs any help, we should do our best to cooperate." Yu Qianqiu smiled noncommittally. The waiter of the 100 Flowers house had already served the food. He asked casually, "Do you want to eat together?" Seeing that they shook their heads, he didn't hold back and buried his head in the food. He didn't say anything and no one knew what he was thinking. The 8 of them were a little speechless. They heard about him smashing the 100 Flowers house as soon as they arrived, and they still ate and lived here. They didn't hear about the people of the 100 Flowers Palace doing anything to him. After eating, Yu Qianqiu patted his stomach, looking very comfortable. Bai Zizong had stayed with him before and knew that he liked to take advantage of others. He immediately went to pay for him, but the shopkeeper didn't accept it. He said that Yu Qianqiu's expenses in the 100 Flowers house were all free, which surprised the 8 of them. Smashing the place and living for free? Was there such a good thing in the world? "I heard that the Cultivation Alliance is discussing something. Aren't you four great clans going?" Yu Qianqiu asked leisurely. "Sir, didn't you join the Cultivation Alliance? Didn't you receive the notice?" Bai Shan asked curiously. It wasn't hard to guess what he meant. "We came here to make our stand and wait for you to go together." Of course Yu Qianqiu also heard it. He paused and said, "Someone did inform me, but I was busy with something important just now, so I was delayed." "Then sir, are you done with what you have on hand? If you're free, let's go together," Bai Shan said politely. Yu Qianqiu wanted to say that he wasn't done, but he happened to meet Ziyi's strange gaze. He couldn't help but feel guilty. Thinking about it, he felt that it wasn't good. If he kept hiding here, he had to go out and get some information. How could he get rich hiding in his room? Moreover, a whole morning had passed. The Cultivation Alliance's discussion was probably almost done. It was the right time to show his face and ask for information. "All right then, let's go together." Yu Qianqiu laughed. There were exactly 10 people in the group. As soon as they left the 100 Flowers house, they started pushing each other. The four great clans insisted that Yu Qianqiu and Ziyi walk in front. However, Yu Qianqiu didn't want to show off at this time, so he insisted on hiding at the back. In the end, the four great clans couldn't persuade him, so they let him and Ziyi follow behind. It didn't take long for the group to reach the entrance of the Cultivation Alliance. At this time there were already a lot of people around. They were all people who didn't have the right to enter. Seeing that the four great clans had arrived, someone immediately jeered, "The four great clans are so arrogant. Coming at this time, they really don't care about the sects." With one person taking the lead, there were others who had nothing to do and followed suit. The four great clans suddenly became the center of attention. Although the four great clans weren't happy, they wouldn't argue with these people in public. Moreover, they really came too late, so they could only look at them coldly. The jeering people took advantage of the number of people and saw that the four great clans didn't react, so they were very cocky. "Damn it. A bunch of hooligans purposely making me show off." Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched. The four great clans became the center of attention. He couldn't keep a low profile even if he wanted to hide at the back. Many people realized that the person behind the four great clans was Yu Qianqiu, so they all remained silent. However, there were those who were dumb, stupid, and loud. When Yu Qianqiu showed himself, there was a person next to him who was grinning and almost spitting on Yu Qianqiu's face. Bang! A fist smashed heavily on that person's face and blood and broken teeth flew out. Crack! A foot kicked from the side of that person's calf. The sound of the leg bone breaking was so crisp, and the whole leg was directly broken. Ah! That person fell to the ground and let out a scream. B*****. Yu Qianqiu finally couldn't help but make a move and scolded. After some people next to that person saw who it was, they all subconsciously took a step back, just enough time for that person to hug his leg and lie on the ground howling and rolling. At this time, the surrounding people realized that the person who had just punched and kicked was Yu Qianqiu, and suddenly quieted down. The people from the four great clans looked back and were shocked. They didn't expect that Yu Qianqiu would actually make a move at the entrance of the Cultivation Alliance. However, the effect of this punch and kick was quite good, and the annoying noise was finally gone. The crowd in front immediately made way for them. Yu Qianqiu acted like nothing had happened and followed behind the four great clans. After proving his identity at the entrance of the Cultivation Alliance, they walked in together. On the flat ground of the Cultivation Alliance, hundreds of people sat cross-legged in a few circles. In the middle were the representatives of the top 10 sects of the righteous and demonic sections. At this time they were all looking outside. Everyone first heard many people talking about the 4 great clans, and then heard the screams outside. They didn't know what was going on. All the sects were suspicious. Could it be that the people from the 4 great clans made a move at the entrance of the Cultivation Alliance? At this time the people from the 4 great clans walked in, and all the sects became more and more suspicious. What the hell are you screaming for? 2 of you go and see what exactly is going on. Xuanhuan didn't know what was going on, and he shouted with a bad expression. 2 of the 10,000 demons immediately dashed out. There were many praying mats outside the venue, and the 10 of them each took one and sat at the outermost area. Although xianxia wanted to be as low-key as possible, Ziyi's purple clothes were too eye-catching. Once everyone saw Ziyi, their eyes immediately searched for him. Xuanhuan looked outside, and then looked at xianxia with a face full of suspicion. At this time 2 disciples of the 10,000 demons came back and reported to him, Elder Qiu, a disciple of the 6th-path demon sect, was beaten outside, but no one saw clearly who did it. The person who was beaten didn't see clearly either. The 2 of them were very depressed. The person who was beaten said that he was ambushed, and he didn't see clearly, but the others all stuttered and said that they didn't see clearly. Xianxia was even more stunned. There was such a good thing? A figure in the crowd jumped into the air and flipped out of the courtyard. After a while that person came back in a flash and stood at the periphery, staring angrily at the people from the 4 great clans. He shouted, "Who dares to hurt my disciple? Quickly come out and admit your guilt." Chapter 387. The Hexapath Devil sect was ranked 4th in the demonic Tao, just below the Corpse sect. The one who roared at the 4 major families was the chief representative of the Hexapath Devil sect, Yuanjiokue. He was an outstanding figure in the demonic Tao, famous for his violent temper and battle prowess. Although the overall strength of the Hexapath Devil sect wasn't as strong as the other top-ranked sects, Yuanjiokue's personal strength wasn't any weaker than the other sections. "Who injured my disciple? Come out and accept your punishment." Yuanjiokue roared once more. When he heard that his disciple was beaten up, he immediately ran out to investigate. Although the disciple didn't see who did it, he said that it was someone from the 4 major families, so he was sure that it was someone from the 4 major families who did it. How could they accept that their disciple was beaten up when all the sects were gathered here? Furthermore, the Hexapath Devil sect had no reason to be afraid of the 4 major families, so they naturally had to get back their face. The expressions of the people from the 4 great clans changed. This was clearly against the 4 great clans. As a direct descendant of Bai Changchun, Bai Shan naturally could not let Xianxia come out to accept his punishment. Just as he was about to stand up and fight back, he was stopped by Xianxia, who was behind him. Xianxia slowly stood up. He was still happy when he heard that no one saw who did it, so he wanted to maintain his silence. However, the other party had already pointed at the noses of the 4 major families. If it was any other sect, he would definitely continue to pretend that he didn't know anything. However, the 4 major families were related to him, and they would be of great help to him in the future. He didn't want to disappoint them. "I was the one who did it." Xianxia admitted it. Everyone had expected this. They were all puzzled. The 4 major families had always been neutral, and they never had any conflicts with any sections. So why would they attack someone at this moment? It was Xianxia, that madman. That made sense. "It's you?" Yuanjiokue was slightly startled. Then anger rose in his heart. He pointed his finger and shouted, "Xianxia, don't you dare run amok in the cultivation world just because you're a bandit. Others give you some face, but you really think you're something? I, Yuanjiokue, have never put a clown like you in my eyes. How dare a scoundrel like you mess around in front of my 6 paths demon sect? Elder brother Yuan, don't be angry, don't be angry." Xuanhuan flashed over, pulled Yuanjiokue and comforted him. "Xuanhuan, get out of my way." Yuanjiokue swung his arm, turned around, pointed at Xuanhuan's nose and scolded, "I've always heard that you and this scoundrel are brothers. It's because of people like you that this scoundrel can run amok in the cultivation world. Don't call me elder brother in the future, or it will dirty my ears." Scram. Yuanjiokue's words could be said to have hit the hearts of the people present. Although Xianxia was happy in the cultivation world, the sects that had been in the cultivation world for many years didn't really look up to Xianxia. If it wasn't for the ambiguous attitude of Fuxian Island and 10,000 demons towards Xianxia, someone would have already made a move on Xianxia. Not to mention that Xianxia had the support of the 4 major families. Yuanjiokue's words were like a wake-up call to Xianxia. When he looked at the people in charge of the other sects, almost all of them looked down on him. Clearly they all agreed with Yuan Jiokuei's words. Yu Qianqiu immediately understood his position in the cultivation world. When he suddenly attacked someone at the entrance earlier, he subconsciously thought that he was afraid of anyone because he was a scoundrel. He thought he was impressive, but in the eyes of the people with a certain level of status in the large sects, they did not look up to him at all. He could only scare those little disciples who didn't have much of a cultivation base. How dare you! Just when Yuan Jiokuei told Qiu Wuyuan to piss off, for bellows rang out. The 4 generals of the Mo family in black furs arrived with a flash and surrounded Yuan Jiokuei. Yuan Jiokuei glanced around and snorted coldly. 9 people immediately shot out from the crowd and surrounded the 4 generals of the Mo family. They were clearly from the Hexapath demon sect. When I was dominating the world, the 4 of you were still slaves to Yan Wuchen, yet you dare to yell at me now. Are you trying to rebel? Yuan Jiokuei sneered. Then he waved his hand at the 9 people from the Hexapath demon sect and called out, "Leave. I'd like to see just what the 4 generals of the 10,000 demons are capable of." The domineering nature of a demonic cultivator was completely revealed in just a few words. Everyone was slightly speechless. It seemed like Yuan Jiokuei wanted to deal with the 4 generals of the Mo family alone. The people from the Hexapath demon sect did not say anything else and backed down. After being called slaves, the 4 generals of the Mo family remained cold. They were not angered at all, but they began to radiate with pressing killing intent. Qiu Wuyuan was not a good-tempered person either, but his expression immediately returned to normal. He immediately yelled out, "Stop messing around, all of you back off." Hearing that, the 4 generals of the Mo family immediately flashed behind him. They did not even hesitate at all. "Brother Yuan, calm down. Let's talk things out. There's nothing that can't be resolved." Qiu Wuyuan was already giving face by saying something like that after being scolded. Otherwise, there was no reason for the 10,000 demons to be afraid of Yuan Jiokuei with their status in the demonic sections. That's right. Now that we're facing a great enemy, let's just bear with it for now. When Zhongping from the Blood Demon Palace originally wanted to watch the show between the 10,000 demons, but seeing that Qiu Wuyuan had given in, he knew that he couldn't watch it anymore, so he stood up and said something nice. After all, the righteous sects wanted to watch the show between the demonic sects more than him. The demonic sects could watch it, but the righteous sects could not. When Ziyi saw that Yu Qianqiu was in a daze after being scolded, her pretty face immediately turned cold. Senior Bai's disciple was not someone that could be scolded. She stood up and slowly walked towards Yuan Jiokuei. The whole place instantly became incomparably quiet. Yuan Jiokuei vigilantly looked back and his pupils shrank. He immediately turned around and got into a fighting stance. He could look down on Yu Qianqiu, but he didn't dare to look down on Ziyi. This mysterious woman had fought against 7 experts in the final phase of tribulation passing. He knew that he was no match for her, but he couldn't lose the reputation of the Hexapath demon sect. Qiu Wuyuan and Wen Zhongping looked at each other. This woman was not an ordinary person. Her background was mysterious and they didn't know what her temper was like. The 2 of them didn't know what to do. Yuan Jiokuei stared at Yu Qianqiu and sneered, "A scoundrel is a scoundrel. He actually needs a woman to stand up for him." "Yuan Jiokuei, watch your mouth. What's wrong with a woman?" A woman's voice sounded. In the field, 10 disciples in white from the Moon Clan stood up. The leading woman flashed over. It was Hua Yingyue, the elder of the Moon Clan. Hua Yingyue had already received a message from Jade Flower Fairy, asking her to protect Yu Qianqiu and Ziyi to the best of her ability. Yuan Jiokuei's words just now finally gave her an excuse. The righteous people were all stunned. How come things were getting more and more complicated? Originally, they only wanted to see the diabolism become a joke, but now even the righteous people were involved. In a second, everyone understood. Yu Qianqiu and Ziyi had joined the Cultivation Alliance with the Moon Clan as their guarantor. The Moon Clan was using this as a pretext to make a fuss. The Fuxian Island and the Moon Clan had always been on good terms. Quan Deming also couldn't sit still. He flashed between the 2 groups and comforted, "Everyone, let's talk this out. Don't be impulsive. The matter of Yan Bugui's challenge hasn't been decided yet. If we start fighting among ourselves, we'll become a laughing stock." Being blocked by a group of women, Yuan Jiokuei himself was also stunned. "Z, come back." Yu Qianqiu's voice attracted everyone's attention. He walked forward and bowed deeply to Yuan Jiokuei. "Senior Yuan, please calm down. I was too impulsive just now. Please forgive me." He had thought it through. He had to lower his head when it was necessary. Otherwise, it would be hard for him to integrate into this circle. If he didn't integrate into this circle, it would be hard for him to find a chance to make a fortune. He had to bear with it even if he felt uncomfortable. When his strength matured, he would be able to deal with anyone he wanted. When the various sects heard his words, they immediately felt that it was strange. This madman had always been unforgiving when he had the upper hand. Currently, with the appearance of Ze and the others, it was clear that he had already gained the upper hand. Yet, he still ran out to apologize with such a sincere attitude. It was truly surprising. Qiu Weiyuan stared at Yu Qianqiu with sparkling eyes. He wondered if he had seen wrongly. Although Yuan Jiukui's attitude was commendable, he had crippled a disciple of the Six Paths Devil sect. Naturally, Yuan Jiukui wouldn't let this matter rest just because of an apology. Yuan Jiukui glared at Lin Yun and said, "Are you trying to let this matter go with just a sentence? May I know what this junior should do to appease senior?" Yu Qianqiu asked respectfully. Yuan Jiukui's gaze slowly shifted to Lin Yun's leg. He said in a solemn voice, "I won't say anything else. You broke the left leg of my disciple. If you can break your own leg, this old man will be able to answer to the sect when I return. This old man can also guarantee that the Six Paths Devil sect will treat this matter as if it never happened." The people of the four major clans also stood behind Yu Qianqiu when they heard this. They glared at Yuan Jiukui. The legs of a little disciple with low cultivation actually wanted to trade for the legs of their old ancestor's direct disciple. If they allowed this to happen, they wouldn't be able to return to the four major clans anymore. Ziyi looked at Yu Qianqiu with an expressionless face. As long as he gave the signal, she would immediately make a move. The other sects also felt that Yuan Jiukui's condition was a bit too harsh. They suspected that he didn't know how to appreciate favors. Sure enough, Yu Qianqiu's expression sank in an instant. He rubbed his nose as he looked at the crowd and sneered, "It's not difficult for me to break one of my legs, but I have something to ask all of you. Although the four great clans and I arrived a bit late, it's fine if everyone provoked and insulted us at the entrance. After all, we were the ones who were rude first." He suddenly turned around and pointed at Yuan Jiukui. He shouted, "But what gives a disciple of the Six Paths Devil sect the right to spit on my face in public? If I spit on your face, will you attack me? I'm afraid you'll even have the heart to kill me, right? There's such a thing? Then he's really asking for a beating." Everyone immediately whispered in each other's ears. Everyone had indeed heard the commotion outside, provoking and insulting the four clans. In such a chaotic situation, there was no guarantee that some naughty disciples would spit on the four clans. Yuan Jiukui was startled when he heard that. How did the Six Paths Devil sect become the ones who stirred up trouble first? But after thinking about it, he was afraid that it was really possible. He paused and said with some uncertainty, "That's not possible. I've never been afraid of anyone." Yu Qianqiu looked around and sneered, "I know that everyone has a lot of misunderstandings about me, causing my reputation in the cultivation world to be bad. But I'm not a deranged person. How could I randomly grab someone and beat them? If Senior Yuan doesn't believe me, why don't you summon the disciple who was beaten? I can confront him directly. Who is right and who is wrong will naturally be clear." Chapter 388. Yuan Jiukui's expression became gloomy. He wasn't completely clueless about that disciple, and he knew that the disciple wasn't very virtuous. But now, as Yu Qianqiu had said, he wanted to interrogate the disciple and find out that his side was in the wrong first. If that happened, wouldn't he become a laughingstock? Most importantly, he thought that he was in the right and offended several groups of people. He even threw away the face of the Devil Path's leader, the 10,000 demons. If the truth came out and it was disadvantageous to his side, he would be embarrassed. While he was hesitating, many people could see his apprehension. Qiu Weiyuan winked at Wen Zhongping and pulled Yuan Jiukui with a smile. "Old brother Yuan, for my sake, this matter ends here. Don't pursue it anymore. I'll send someone to treat that disciple's injury, and I'll definitely return him a healthy leg." "That's right. Old brother Yuan, personal grudges are a small matter, but take the big picture into consideration." Wen Zhongping also persuaded. Yuan Jiukui naturally understood that these two demonic cultivators were taking the opportunity to give him a way out. If he didn't appreciate it, then he wouldn't know how to appreciate a favor. But he didn't know if Yu Qianqiu would fight to the bitter end. This guy was famous for being merciless. Yuan Jiukui looked at Yu Qianqiu. Qiu Weiyuan understood his meaning, so he walked over to Yu Qianqiu with a smile, patted his shoulder and said, "Old brother Yu, give this old brother some face and forget it. How about we end this matter here? Since Senior Qiu has spoken, we can swallow this small grievance." Yu Qianqiu also looked at Yuan Jiukue and said, I wonder if Senior Yuan still wants to pursue this matter. Yuan Jiukue snorted heavily, then flashed back to his original position and sat down cross-legged. His attitude was obvious, indicating that he wouldn't pursue this matter any further. What are you snorting about? Let's see if you still dare to snort when this father destroys your Six Paths demon sect one day. Yu Qianqiu's brows twitched. It's better if this father doesn't pursue this matter, then I won't waste my breath. He also turned around and returned to his seat. It's all right. Everyone return to your positions. Qiu Weiyuan waved his hand at the crowd and smiled. The group of people returned to their positions, and this matter was over for the time being. Ziyi was still feeling quite indignant. She looked at Yu Qianqiu beside her and wondered what had happened to him. Yesterday he had smashed someone's counter because of a single sentence, and today he was scolded in the nose and endured it. Yu Qianqiu had already put this matter aside for the time being. He had thought that the discussion between the various sects had already ended, but who would have thought that it was still going on? He had no idea what had happened for it to take such a long time. He sat at the back and listened for a while before he understood. It turns out that this time, Yan Bugui brought 2 Tribulation Realm cultivators with him, as well as 50 Tribulation Realm cultivators. A total of 53 people came to Baihua Palace, intending to reunite with Baihua Fairy as husband and wife. In the end, they were obstructed by the various sects led by the supporting Immortal Island. At that time, both sides almost came to blows. It was unknown what Yan Bugui was thinking, but when he had the upper hand he forcefully endured it. Actually, everyone understood that Yan Bugui wasn't ready to officially turn against the Chinese cultivation world yet. He was probably still waiting for the foreign cultivation world's reinforcements to arrive, and the foreign cultivation world was probably also coordinating this matter. And the Chinese cultivation world wasn't ready either. The main reason was that there were too many sects, so it was hard for them to reach a consensus. The main problem was that once a fight broke out, who would contribute how much money, how much manpower, and who would be the commander. The righteous sects didn't feel at ease handing over manpower and money to the demonic sects and vice versa. In fact, no one felt at ease handing over their own things to others. A large-scale war wasn't just a fight between two people. Once a winner was decided, they would have to be prepared for a long period of time. The longer it lasted, the more spirit stones and manpower would be consumed, and that would be a huge number. Although all the sects had stored a lot of spirit stones for emergencies, no one would take out their money for no reason. Who didn't hope that they would contribute less money and manpower, while others would contribute more? After the war, the strength of the sects might be reshuffled. Everyone wanted to preserve their strength. The foreign cultivation world on Yan Bugui's side as well as the Chinese cultivation world were probably facing the same awkward situation, so they didn't start fighting for the time being. In short, whoever was ready first would make the first move. That was for sure. If they couldn't officially turn against each other, they could at least do something like east wind west wind, dampening the other party's morale. And so, last night, Yan Bugui suddenly sent someone to deliver a challenge Jade Archive to the Cultivation Alliance. The content was very simple. Both sides would send their people to fight 20 rounds. Regardless of whether they were dead or alive, the winner would be determined by the number of wins and losses. The loser would have to pay 1 billion high-grade spirit stones to the winner. Of course, the challenge couldn't be without rules. It was impossible for one side to send an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator to fight, while the other side sent a late-stage tribulation-passing cultivator to kill the other side. That wouldn't be a challenge. It would be no different from seeking death. Yan Bugui's letter of challenge stated that either side could send their people to challenge the other side first. One person could go on stage repeatedly, but the person sent by the challenge side couldn't have a higher cultivation level than the challenger. Of course, if the challenge side was willing to send someone with a lower cultivation level to die, the opposing side naturally wouldn't have any objections. That night, the Chinese cultivation world replied, "Accept the challenge." This was something that couldn't be avoided. Whoever dared to say the word, avoid, would probably be drowned in spittle. But 1 billion high-grade spirit stones couldn't possibly be given to a single sect. When it came to apportioning the money and manpower, it would be a little difficult. Anyone could make the argument, but the key was which sect would contribute the money and manpower. Thus, after discussing for half a day, they still couldn't come up with a solution. In short, everyone had thousands of reasons, all of which were for them to contribute less. 1 billion high-grade spirit stones. When Yu Qianqiu heard this, his eyes almost emitted a green light, and he and Purple Dress looked at each other in unison. Yan Bugui came from the 10,000 demons, and now he has become the scourge of the Chinese cultivation world. For this challenge, the 10,000 demons can't absolve themselves from the blame. I'm not saying that the 10,000 demons will pay all of the 1 billion high-grade spirit stones, but the 10,000 demons still have to pay the most. Before De Luo Sec's Zhu Xianxian could finish, Qiu Weiyuan jumped up and scolded, "Bullsh**t. Yan Bugui has long established his own sect. He is him and the 10,000 demons is 10,000 demons. If the De Luo sect doesn't want to pay, then just say it. Don't always use this as an excuse. This is the whole Chinese cultivation world's business, not the 10,000 demons' business. Qiu Weiyuan, what you said is wrong. Why didn't someone like Yan Bugui come from other sects, but from the 10,000 demons? If it wasn't for the 10,000 demons' lack of discipline, this wouldn't have happened. I think Elder Zhu is right. The 10,000 demons should pay the most. The one who said this was the sword faction's elder Duan Tianbua, who was ranked 4th in the righteous sections. That's right. That's right. A group of righteous sects echoed, and they all pointed their spears at the 10,000 demons. The expressions of the demons kept changing. Logically speaking, they should be supporting the 10,000 demons, but only the 10,000 demons could be used against them. If they had to pay more, then so be it. After all, the 10,000 demons had a lot of money, so this amount of money was nothing. Yu Qianzhou finally understood. No wonder he saw Qiu Weiyuan's face the moment he came in. He had become the target of everyone's attacks. So, Yan Bugui had caused trouble, and now the 10,000 demons had become the scapegoat. It was really hard on Qiu Weiyuan, who had been running around outside. Duan Tianbua, you're not a good person either. You call yourself a righteous sect, but you're faster than anyone else when something happens. Fine. If you think that this has nothing to do with your sword faction, then please withdraw from the Cultivation Alliance. We, the 10,000 demons, will pay for your sword faction's money. Qiu Weiyuan pointed at Duan Tianbua's nose and scolded him. Then he looked around at the crowd and patted his chest loudly. If the righteous sects think that this has nothing to do with you, you can all withdraw from the Cultivation Alliance. We, the 10,000 demons, will pay for the righteous sect's money. A bunch of shameless people who call themselves righteous sects, tui. Qiu Weiyuan argued with the crowd. He was so angry that his face was red. After he said those harsh words, a few righteous sects immediately stood up and said, "Qiu Weiyuan, speak clearly. Who are you calling shameless?" "I'm calling a bunch of cowards. Whoever wants to cower in this matter, I'll scold them. Whoever wants to fight, I'll play with them." Qiu Weiyuan was too lazy to argue anymore. He could not argue clearly anyway. He would die of exhaustion if he kept arguing with so many people. He happened to glance at Yu Qianzhou just now and his heart lit up. Although he was not as good with words as Yu Qianzhou and could always reason, he could learn from Yu Qianzhou and act shamelessly, right? Who can still snatch money from me? As soon as the righteous sects stood up, there was no need to mention the 4 generals of the demon clan. A few other sects from the demon clan also stood up. It was fine if they just talked about it, but if they really fought, the other sects from the demon clan would definitely not let the 10,000 demons suffer losses. This time it was lively. As one of the sects stood up, the second one stood up. In the end, the situation of the 10,000 demons alone became a situation where the righteous and the demon clan were fighting. Qiu Weiyuan's pressure was instantly reduced. He glanced at Yu Qianzhou, who was pinching his chin and watching the show. He thought to himself, no wonder this guy could always stir up big trouble with just a little bit of it. This shameless method was just a try, and immediately one family's problem became everyone's problem. At the same time, he could also save himself some trouble. It was worth learning. The situation was a little out of control. The 4 great clans had always been neutral. They did not belong to the demon clan or the righteous clan. A few people looked at Yu Qianzhou, who was pinching his chin, and decided to just watch the show. Yu Qianzhou was very happy in his heart. The representatives from the various sects really did not disappoint the sections. They did their best to fight for the greatest benefits for their sections. Everyone please calm down. I have an idea, but I don't know if everyone is willing to listen to it. Quan Deming from Fuxian Island saw that the commotion was getting out of hand. He frowned and thought for a while, then immediately shouted. Hearing that there was an idea, and it might even be related to their sects, everyone immediately quieted down and looked at Quan Deming. The latter waved his hand and said, "Everyone sit down. It's not a solution to keep arguing like this. Listen to me slowly." Qiu Weiyuan took the lead and sat down first. After everyone started arguing, he did not say anything. Instead, he stayed out of it. The people from the various sects also sat down one after another. Chapter 389. Quan Deming stood out like a crane in a flock of chickens. He scanned the crowd and said slowly, "If possible, the top 10 sects of the righteous and demon sects should share the 1 billion. Before he could finish, Yuan Jiokui laughed and said, "That's not a good idea. How can our wealth compare to your supporting Immortal Island? This seems to be unfair." "Brother Yuan, why don't you listen to Elder Quan first? I believe Elder Quan won't speak without thinking." Chiu Wuyuan stopped him. In fact, even if there was nothing else, he would agree with this. 20 sects would share 1 billion, and each sect would only get 50 million. This was worth it. "All right, I'll listen to supporting Xian Island's opinion." Yuan Jiokui smiled disapprovingly. Quan Deming nodded and said, 1 billion is not a small number, but it would be a joke to ask the entire Chinese cultivation world to share it. My suggestion is that supporting Xian Island and 10,000 demons each contribute 100 million. Daluo sect, Moon sect, Blood Demon Palace, and Corpse sect each contribute 50 million. Our 6 sects will take 400 million, and the remaining 600 million will be shared by the other 14 sections. What do you all think? Hearing this, other than the top 10 sects of the righteous and demon sects, the other sects all nodded in agreement. They were not allowed to contribute even 1 spiritual stone. It would be strange if they didn't agree. "I think it's fine." Chiu Wuyuan also stood up and patted his chest. 10,000 demons will contribute this 100 million. 100 million was far better than 10,000 demons. Plus, 10,000 demons was the leader of the demonic sects, so it was reasonable for them to contribute a little more than the other sections. A leader should have the bearing of a leader. "I think it's fine." The Daluo sect, Moon sect, Blood Demon Palace, and Corpse sect naturally wouldn't have any objections. First of all, Fuxian Island and 10,000 demons offered twice as much as them. Second, with their status in the cultivation world, offering 50 million was just an average amount. If they still had any objections, it would be too unreasonable. The other 14 sects felt that it was not worth it. The 600 million would be divided among the 14 sects, and each sect would have to share more than 40 million. It was not much different from 20 sects sharing it equally, but most people agreed. It would not be difficult for them to fork out this amount of money. In addition, the few leading sects had already agreed, so it would not be good for anyone to say no. Thus, it was equivalent to tacitly agreeing. "Elder Quan, since we have all paid, how should we divide the 1 billion high-grade spirit stones if we win?" Yuan Jiokui suddenly asked. The other sects also stared at Quan Deming. "That's right." The matter of splitting the money had to be made clear, otherwise there would be problems later on. "That's easy," Quan Deming said eloquently. "There are only 20 matches in total. Since 20 sects have paid up, I believe that it won't be a problem for 20 of our sects to randomly send out 20 people. The 20 sects that have paid up can all send their people up to fight. If they win, the sect that pays the money will take back the money that the other sects have to share. The 1 billion earned will be divided into 20 portions. As long as the sect wins 1 match, they will get 50 million. The number of matches they win will be the same. If the sect wins all 20 matches, they will take all the 1 billion earned. My supporting Immortal Island will not have any objections. If we lose in the end, everyone can only admit that they are useless. They will definitely not give us the money for free." Haha. Everyone roared with laughter. This was a fair method, so no one had any objections. At least if they won, they would not lose money. In addition, of course, the more effort they put in, the more benefits they would get. This logic was reasonable everywhere. Just when everyone thought the problem had been solved, Yuan Jiokui suddenly stood up and said, "I still feel that something is wrong. This was a good method and it was already considered fair." "What was wrong with it?" Chiu Wuyuan turned around and said with a slight frown, "Brother Yuan, could it be that you have another brilliant idea?" Yuan Jiokui pointed at the 4 major families and said in a clear voice, "The combined strength of the 4 major families is not weaker than some of the top 10 sections. I think the 4 major families should also participate. The remaining 600 million will be divided equally among the 15 families. Each family will get 40 million, which is just right." He suddenly realized that something was wrong. How could he easily believe the words of that scoundrel, Yu Qianshou? But he had tacitly agreed not to pursue the matter. Thinking about it, he felt uncomfortable. When he remembered that the 4 major families were on the same side as Yu Qianshou, he came up with this idea. If they won this challenge, they could talk about it later. If they lost, they could let the 4 major families lose some money. It could also make those people feel disgusted. Everyone knew that Yuan Jiokui still had grievances in his heart. They all looked at the 4 major families. Presumably, the four major families would not be able to refuse in this situation. Sure enough, Bai Shan stood up and said, although the four major families do not belong to the righteous or demonic sects, we are also part of China. It is reasonable for us to contribute money. After saying that, he sat down. This was also a sign of agreement. Yu Qianqiu was happy in his heart. He was worried that he could not find an excuse to intervene and make money. Now the opportunity came to him. That kid outside did not beat him for nothing. Since the four major families have agreed, if there is no other objection, then this matter is settled. Quan Deming asked Qiu Wuyuan, Elder Qiu, what do you think? I have no objection. Just let me know when you want to pay. 10,000 demons will not refuse. Qiu Wuyuan laughed. He was in a good mood now that a troublesome matter had been solved. Quan Deming nodded and said to the crowd, the other party has more than 50 experts in the crossing calamity stage and 2 in the final stage. If you want to take this opportunity to make money, you might as well call for experts from your sect. This is much faster than us working hard to earn spirit stones from the spirit stone mine. Everyone laughed and suddenly became spirited, as if it was not difficult to make money. Most people felt that this matter did not concern them and finally did not have to worry. After the matter was settled, the group of people dispersed, leaving a large pile of praying mats on the ground. Naturally, the unlucky disciples on duty would come to clean it up. Ignoring the strange gazes of the outsiders, Yu Qianqiu and the others followed Bai Shan to the Bai family's shop. They had something to discuss. There were some decorations here, so their conversation would not be easily overheard. The shopkeeper of the Bai family's shop had already heard about Yu Qianqiu beating people at the entrance of the Cultivation Alliance. He was speechless when he saw him. It was hard to imagine how the family could be entangled with such a person. After leading them to the back, the shopkeeper left. The matters of the higher-ups were not something that a shopkeeper like him could care about. The date set by the Cultivation Alliance and Yen Bugue was tomorrow. Remembering that the other party had 2 experts in the final stage of the crossing calamity stage, after a discussion, Bai Shan said solemnly, since we have agreed to participate, we must prevent accidents. I will send a message back now and ask the family to invite 2 elders to come here overnight in case of emergencies. The others also nodded and felt that this was appropriate. Unexpectedly, Yu Qianqiu rubbed his hands and laughed, that is too troublesome. Why bother 2 elders to come here overnight? I have an idea, but I don't know if I should say it. Wasn't he talking nonsense? If he said it, how could the people of the 4 families not let him say it? The attitude of the 8 people immediately became respectful. Bai Shan cupped his hands and said, if you have something to say, please say it. We are all ears. Ha 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 ha. Yu Qianqiu couldn't stop laughing shyly. He seemed to be a little embarrassed. After a while, he rubbed his hands and said, this is what I think. For this challenge, the 4 families just need to put their names on it. I will pay the 40 million and Ziyi and I will fight. You don't have to worry about it. As for that, if we win, haha. You know that I am a little short of money. We can keep the money we win for the time being. What do you think of my idea? For money again. The few people looked at each other. Bai Shan looked at him and said suspiciously, I wonder what stage has Mr.'s cultivation reached? Please tell us so that we can be prepared. Ah. Yu Qianqiu laughed and said, I am really ashamed. I am still in the early stage of nascent soul. The few people looked at each other and didn't say anything. Although it was already very fast for him to reach this stage at his age, this challenge was not a trivial matter. It was not a matter of life and death. Bai Shan shook his head and said, please forgive me, mister. I dare not let you take this risk. If there is any accident, I really can't explain to the family. What are you afraid of? Isn't Luo Qingtian at the crossing calamity stage? Didn't you still lose to me in the end? You don't have to worry. It is settled. Send the news back. If the 4 families have any objections, let them come to me. You don't need to explain anything. Yu Qianqiu seemed to be more interested in money than his life. He turned around and said to Ziyi, Ziyi, I will leave the last stage of the crossing calamity stage to you. Do you have the confidence to win? Yes. Ziyi nodded. At the side, Bai Zicong and the other 3 looked at Ziyi with complicated expressions. There was a hint of admiration in their gazes. She was beautiful, pure, and had an extraordinary temperament. In addition, she had a high cultivation base and a mysterious background. She was indeed quite tempting. This time, the 4 of them had been sent here to build a good relationship with Yu Qianqiu. However, at the same time, they had received a rather ambiguous mission. If possible, it would be best if they could develop feelings for Ziyi. Other than Wu Liqing, the other three were a little unwilling at first because they had never seen her before. Who knew what kind of person she was? But they also knew that for a big family like theirs, sometimes they couldn't make decisions about relationships. However, when they saw Ziyi, they were all attracted. They didn't expect a cultivator in the last stage of the crossing calamity stage to be so young and beautiful. They were immediately attracted. However, such a beautiful woman was ordered around by Yu Qianqiu as a maid. Was really a pity. However, they were relieved. Yu Qianqiu clearly didn't have any other relationship with Ziyi. When you attack, don't be soft. If you can kill them, don't let them go. Even if you let them go, they won't be grateful. Before you go, think about what my master did when 16 soul-forming cultivators joined hands to fight against him. As long as they are your opponents, don't let any of them go. Don't be soft. Kill them all. Yu Qianqiu warned earnestly. He was afraid that Ziyi would be soft because she didn't have much experience. In a battle of life and death, she would be at a disadvantage. This girl was most convinced by Changchun. At this time, he could only bring up Changchun to strengthen her confidence. However, when these words fell into the ears of the four families, they were shocked. They all knew who Yu Qianqiu's master was. In other words, their ancestors' cultivation was so strong that it was shocking. Chapter 390. Ziyi's gaze instantly became firm, and she nodded her head seriously. Bai Shan cupped his hands and bowed to Yu Qianqiu excitedly. Sir, can you tell us in detail about the Battle of the East Sea that you mentioned just now? The people of the four great clans all cast expectant gazes at Yu Qianqiu. The legendary battle of the soul formation stage was indeed worthy of admiration. Furthermore, the most powerful protagonists were their own relatives, so the anticipation was even stronger. Tell you in detail? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He thought to himself, I heard it from Nongzhu, that old handsome guy. How can I tell you in detail? He looked serious and sighed, I can only be fascinated. It's indescribable, indescribable. That kind of realm is beyond our reach. Let's not talk about it. Ziyi rarely spoke in front of outsiders. At this moment, she clenched her fists and said in a woman's voice, Elder Bai is undoubtedly the most powerful cultivator in the world. Ziyi will admire you for life. Her words were even more inspiring than Yu Qianqiu's. The people from the four major families were extremely excited, especially the people from the Bai family. They blushed and couldn't express their emotions for a long time. Ziyi, let's go back. Yu Qianqiu turned around and kept shaking his head and sighing as if he had really seen the battle. Ziyi followed him and left, leaving the people from the four major families to daydream. They imagined how the thin elder in the portrait in the ancestral hall of their family looked in reality. He was undoubtedly the most powerful cultivator in the world. If I can't see our ancestor once in this life, I, Bai Zitsong, will regret it for the rest of my life. Bai Zitsong, who had been standing in silence for a long time, suddenly said while gritting his teeth. Bai Shan let out a long sigh and said, It's not easy to see our ancestor. Didn't you hear what your father said? The great ancestor was the punishment enforcer of the demon ghost realm and lived in the center of the demon ghost realm. Even if you were at the end of the tribulation transcendent stage, you would not be able to go deep into the demon ghost realm, let alone the place where the great ancestor lived. If you really want to go, the only way is to rely on Yu Qianqiu. If Yu Qianqiu is willing to introduce you, it shouldn't be a big problem. Bai Zitsong suddenly turned his head and said, Third uncle, if Li Cheng and the other three could be personally taught by our ancestor, once we succeed in our cultivation, we would be able to learn 1/100th of our ancestor's abilities. Who in the Chinese cultivation world would dare to make things difficult for us? I don't understand why the old ancestor would not care about his own descendants and instead accept an outsider as a personal disciple. Could it be that none of us descendants can enter the old ancestor's eyes? This sudden statement stunned the people of the four families. Tan Fei, Wu Liqing and Jing Zhuo all breathed rapidly. Needless to say, it would be beneficial to be taught by the great ancestor of the world's #1 expert. When the four heirs thought of the extraordinary purple dress following beside Yu Qianqiu, their expressions became a little strange. How dare you? Bai Shan suddenly shouted, Bai Zitsong, are you out of your mind? How can the great ancestor's thoughts be guessed by ordinary people? The great ancestor must have his own reasons for doing this. It's not something you can comment on. Third uncle, don't tell me you still don't understand? Bai Zitsong pointed in the direction where the two of them went and said angrily, Who is the hidden force behind him? Could he really comprehend such a mysterious and strange technique by himself? Who gave him those 2 treasured sabers? Without a doubt, all of these were given to him by the great ancestor. Otherwise, how could a lowly disciple like him surpass our cultivation base in such a short period of time? He dares to do whatever he wants in the cultivation world because he has the great ancestor's support. I don't understand why the great ancestor would do this. Jealousy always makes people lose their minds easily. When Yu Qianzhou was just a lowly disciple, Bai Shan could still bow down to him. Now Yu Qianzhou was higher than him in every aspect. Even his seniority was higher than him. When he saw that Ziyi was obedient to Yu Qianzhou's words, an unknown fire completely ignited the dissatisfaction in his heart. Although Wu Liqing and the other two had similar thoughts, they never had such strong feelings. They were stunned by Bai Zizong's words. They did not expect Bai Zizong to say something like this. Tan Huazong, Jing Xingping and Wu Anfeng looked at each other. Bai Shan was trembling with anger. He pointed his finger and yelled, "Bastard, kneel down." Bai Zizong clenched his teeth and kneeled in front of Bai Shan. His expression showed his unwillingness. Bai Shan said bitterly, "Without the great ancestor, there would be no 4 major clans. Jealousy blinds your eyes, you can't achieve anything. How dare you talk about the great ancestor's right and wrong? Do you think you're qualified to take over the Bai clan in the future? You treacherous bastard, slap yourself." Slap, slap, slap. Bai Zizong slapped his own mouth without saying anything. He slapped his own mouth again and again. Wu Liqing and the other two did not know what to do. Tan Huazong and the other two quickly advised, "Brother Bai, it's enough to teach him a lesson. It's understandable for a young man to say something rash. You don't have to go overboard." Bai Zizong, who was slapping himself, suddenly stopped. He touched his face, shook his head and smiled bitterly. He kowtowed to Bai Shan and said, "Third uncle, I know I'm wrong. I was blinded by jealousy just now and said something rash. Please forgive me." The few of them were speechless by his sudden change. Yanbu Gui and the Cultivation Alliance's challenge location was in a mountain not too far away from the 100 Flowers Valley. To be exact, it should be in a valley surrounded by mountains. It took some effort to choose this place. People could stand around and watch, and the spacious valley in the middle was just right for the fight. There were probably thousands of people on the surrounding mountains. This was the result of the sects restraining their disciples. Otherwise, there would be more people coming to watch the fight. On Yanbu Gui's side, there were about 50 people including himself. From their clothes, most of them were cultivators from other clans. These dozens of people stood on the mountain top facing the many cultivators, but they did not show any fear. It was as if they were looking down on the cultivators of China. Both sides had already sent people to the middle to discuss the start of the fight. Ever since Yanbu Gui found out that Yu Qianzhou was among the crowd on the opposite mountain top, his eyes rarely moved, filled with hatred. If it wasn't for this guy, his family wouldn't be in such an awkward situation. The husband and wife couldn't be together, they colluded with other clans to protect themselves, and even their sect became enemies. Now that they had reached a point where it was either win or die, there was no way out. How could Yu Qianzhou not notice Yanbu Gui, who was the center of attention? Seeing that he kept staring at him, he didn't want to compete with Yanbu Gui with his stare, but it was uncomfortable to be stared at like that. He looked around and found the position of the 10,000 demons. They were not far away, so he slowly walked to the side of Xianhuan and bowed, "Greetings, Senior Qiu." "Greetings, greetings, greetings." Xianhuan looked him up and down. When did this guy become so proactive? It seemed like he was always the one looking for him first. Therefore, with a stomach full of questions, he asked, "Brother Yu, are you looking for me?" The 10,000 demons also looked at him. "Ah, nothing, nothing." Yu Qianzhou looked around with a face full of smiles. "The weather today is really good." The 10,000 demons were not in a good mood. None of them were happy that the son of the previous sect leader had caused such trouble. Thinking about the possibility of fighting him again, they felt even more depressed. At this moment, Yu Qianzhou came over to talk about the weather. The group looked at the sky and felt that it was normal. They didn't notice anything special, but they suspected that there was a deeper meaning behind his words. They were all confused. "Are you really okay?" Xianhuan asked doubtfully. I'm fine." Yu Qianzhou confirmed it again. Then he was too lazy to talk nonsense beside Xianhuan. He seemed to be chatting happily with the 10,000 demons from time to time, creating a harmonious atmosphere. The 10,000 demons reluctantly answered him. They didn't have the mood to talk nonsense with him now. But when this scene fell into the eyes of Yanbu Gui, who was on the opposite mountain, he was so disgusted that he almost broke his teeth from gritting them. What the hell is this guy doing? Xianhuan cursed silently. The more Yu Qianzhou said that he was fine, the more suspicious he became. He and Yu Qianzhou had known each other for a long time. At that time, Yu Qianzhou hadn't joined Fuxian Island yet. Once they met, Yu Qianzhou started to flatter Qiu Weiyuan. Qiu Weiyuan already knew that this guy wasn't a good person. What happened later also confirmed his guess. Now that he suddenly acted like this, Qiu Weiyuan started to look around suspiciously. When his eyes met the hateful eyes on the opposite mountain, he was stunned. Then he understood everything. This guy was obviously using the 10,000 demons to make Yan Bugui angry. He was vicious. Qiu Weiyuan looked at Yu Qianzhou, who was still talking nonsense with the 10,000 demons. His expression changed. He said in a low voice, "Yu Qianzhou, you've achieved your goal. Go back to your position." "Senior Qiu, what do you mean by that?" Yu Qianzhou pretended to be confused. "Please go back." Qiu Weiyuan raised his hand and said bluntly. The dignified myriad demon's palace, the leader of the demonic path, had been used by this fellow like a bunch of blind people. How could they possibly have the nerve to explain themselves so clearly? Yu Qianzhou's expression darkened. He said in a cold voice, "It seems that I'm not welcome in the 10,000 demons. I originally wanted to shamelessly ask to join the 10,000 demons after the competition. That's why I came here to get in touch with you guys. Seems that I was thinking too much. Elder Qiu, please help me thank Palace Leader Bu for inviting me in person. It's not that I don't know what's good for me, but the threshold to join the 10,000 demons is too high. Yu Qianzhou can't cross it. Goodbye." He waved his hand and walked away. The 10,000 demons looked at Qiu Weiyuan in surprise. For someone like Yu Qianzhou, who had mysterious skills and a spiritual treasure, the 10,000 demons couldn't wait to recruit him. "Why did you chase him away?" One of the late tribulation cultivators who rushed here overnight asked in a low voice. "Qiu Weiyuan, what's going on?" Qiu Weiyuan was speechless. He thought to himself, "Did I really think too much and misunderstand? If this guy really wants to join the 10,000 demons, then I..." Chapter 391. Some people who were paying attention to Yu Qianzhou saw him strolling to the 10,000 demons side and chatting happily with the top demonic factions people, but for some reason he came back with a long face. The people from the 4 clans looked at each other. Ziyi stared at him for a while and finally couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong?" Yu Qianzhou expressionlessly said, "Nothing, I just solved a small problem." Ziyi frowned. Why was he still unhappy after solving the problem? She wasn't a talkative person, so she didn't ask. She followed everyone's gaze to the valley. The challenge was about to begin. Both sides seemed to have reached an agreement. Each side handed over 1 billion spirit stones to a middleman, the 10,000 demons. Right now, the only middleman that could be accepted by both sides was the 10,000 demons. Everything that needed to be prepared was ready, so there was nothing to be said. There wasn't even anyone to judge. It seemed that this kind of battle to the death didn't need anyone to judge. The rules had already been set. Apart from the people who escaped from the valley, the rest had no other choice. One of them died and the other lived. It was easy to determine the winner and loser. However, once they went on stage, the possibility of them escaping was very low. No sect could afford to lose face like this. They would definitely punish the people who escaped after the battle. The top 10 sects of the righteous and demonic sects had already gathered their experts, especially the supporting Immortal Island. They had 2 experts at the final stage of the Tribulation Passing Stage and 10 experts at the Tribulation Passing Stage from the Cultivation Pavilion. Dongfang Chang'eo was one of them. It was obvious that the supporting Immortal Island was complacent and wanted to use this challenge to prove their position as the top sect in the world. The 10,000 demons, the leader of the demonic faction, was destined to be unable to compete with the supporting Immortal Island in this matter. Those who knew a little about the cultivation world knew that the supporting Immortal Island was in the hands of the Guan clan while the 10,000 demons were in the hands of the Yan clan. Yan Bugui was the only son of the 10,000 demons' previous leader Yan Wuqian and the current leader Bu Yunxiao's senior brother. If Yan Wuqian didn't die, the 10,000 demons wouldn't dare to do anything to him. After the spirit stones were handed over, the valley quieted down. There was only the sound of the mountain wind. Everyone was looking around, not knowing who would be the first to challenge, and who would be the first to accept the challenge. Damn. What were they waiting for? Yu Qianzhou looked around, wishing he could go up first. Unfortunately, his cultivation level was too low. If he went up first, his opponent's cultivation levels would be above the crossing tribulation stage. According to the rules, they wouldn't be able to challenge him, so going up first would be pointless. According to the rules, those with high cultivation bases could not challenge those with low cultivation bases, while those with low cultivation bases could challenge those with high cultivation bases. However, it seemed that the possibility of the second scenario happening was very low, because it was practically courting death. China's cultivation world didn't know much about the foreign cultivation world, so the sects wanted to send someone to explore the world first before making a move. Yan Bugui, on the other hand, knew the situation of China's cultivation world very well. He wanted to see who would go first before sending someone to deal with the challenge. This was one of the reasons why he was determined to win. The mentality of both sides caused a temporary stalemate. Yu Qianzhou decided to wait a little longer when he thought about the possibility of earning 50 million. If no one went up, he would let Ziyi go. At this moment, Dongfang Chang'ao of the supporting Immortal Island slowly took out a golden spear from his storage bag, attracting everyone's attention. It seemed like the supporting Immortal Island was going to be the first to fight. The supporting Immortal Island was known as the top sect in the world. It might not matter to other sects if this stalemate continued, but the supporting Immortal Island couldn't do this because it was the top sect in the world. Dongfang Chang'ao had been representing the image of the supporting Immortal Island for a long time, so he had to fight first. It's him again. Yu Qianzhou stared at Dongfang Chang'ao with a trace of pity in his eyes. He couldn't help but sigh. Dongfang Chang'ao was simply a desperate man of the supporting Immortal Island. He was always at the forefront. Heroes would eventually reach their twilight, and even a fine horse would stumble. If this went on, he was destined to become a tragic figure. A figure flashed, and Dongfang Chang'ao was already standing in the middle of the valley. The luxurious grass covered him up to his knees. He held his spear and shouted, "Middle stage tribulation passing cultivator of the supporting Immortal Island, Dongfang Chang'ao, accepts the challenge. Who wants to die?" His last sentence was especially sonorous, and his voice echoed in the valley for a long time. "Good," someone shouted. Everyone looked toward the source of the voice and saw Yu Qianzhou taking the lead in clapping and clamoring. Everyone was slightly stunned. Someone from the Cultivation Alliance immediately followed suit. Then, the cheers and applause were continuous, and the atmosphere was immediately livened up. Yu Qianzhou didn't mean anything else. First of all, there was finally someone to light up the fire. Second of all, Dongfang Chang'ao was a real man in his heart. The applause and cheers were not wrong for him. Ziyi looked at Yu Qianzhou in surprise. She didn't expect the crowd to have such a big reaction. Driven by the atmosphere, she couldn't help but applaud. Wu Liqing and the other two looked at Bai Zizong. Bai Zizong smiled bitterly at them and applauded. Dongfang Chang'ao tilted his head and looked at Yu Qianzhou. He nodded and thanked him. It was enough for a man to be cheered by another man for something that he had held onto for his whole life. In the end, he met Qiu Wuyuan of the 10,000 demons. These two represented the leaders of the righteous and evil sects. For the glory of their sects, they fought for everything and never gave in. Qiu Wuyuan looked at Dongfang Chang'ao with an inexplicable expression. He sighed slightly and looked away. This was the first time he gave in to Dongfang Chang'ao. Only the two of them could understand that kind of feeling. Yu Qianzhou's atmosphere was getting stronger. Dongfang Chang'ao's fighting spirit increased. He suddenly turned around and pointed at Yan Bugui and the others on a mountain. He shouted, "Dongfang Chang'ao is here. Who wants to fight me?" Good. This time there was no need for anyone to take the lead. The crowd had already pushed the applause and cheers to the climax. Yan Bugui retracted his resentful gaze from Yu Qianzhou. He looked around and snorted coldly. He slowly walked in front of a person and said in a deep voice, "Mr. Yan, I'm sure you've heard of this person. He can be considered a famous figure in Fuxian Island. His golden source spear is an upper-grade magical treasure. He rarely has a match. Although your cultivation is similar to his, and the black dragon whip in your hand can more or less restrain the spear, don't underestimate him. I'll leave this battle to you." "I've long wanted to meet this person." The cultivator called Mr. Yen chuckled. He gently pulled on a long black whip that was tied to his naked upper body, and it smoothly slid into his hand before coiling into a bundle. He swept down from the mountain and stood about 10 meters away from Dongfang Chang'ao. He chuckled and said, "Xiaoshui country's tribulation passing middle stage cultivator, Yan Biao, is here to challenge you." As soon as he arrived, the surrounding area immediately quieted down. All eyes were focused on the two of them. When Dongfang Chang'ao saw the whip in Yan Biao's hand, he slightly raised his eyebrows. He raised his spear and shouted, "Foreign cultivator, how dare you mess with the Chinese cultivation world?" The spear turned into a phantom and smashed down. Dongfang Chang'ao made the first move. With a loud boom, a long, deep hole appeared on the ground. The air wave sent the surrounding weeds flying. Yan Biao couldn't be hit just like that. He had already disappeared. I've long heard of Dongfang Chang'eo's great name. Now that I see it, you're so clumsy. The voice came from the sky. Yan Biao stopped in the air. The long whip in his hand had already been released. It was like a spirit snake flying in the air. It was extremely nimble. The people of the Cultivation Alliance were shocked. The Chinese cultivation world was good at using flying swords, but this was the first time they had seen someone using a whip. The two late-stage tribulation passing elders of Fuxin Island were called Jinyan and Fan Benlei. Their faces revealed a faint trace of worry. The whip could restrain the spear. In addition, it could be used like a sword. They were afraid that Dongfang Chang'eo would be in danger. Dongfang Chang'eo didn't even raise his head. He straightened his spear and pierced the sky. Whoosh! A golden light shot out from the spearhead and shot toward Yan Biao. While Yan Biao was speaking, his hands were already forming messy hand seals. The long black whip coiled up in the air. The raised whip head was pitch black like a cone, as if it was refined from a beast's horn or tooth. When the golden light shot over, Yan Biao didn't dodge. He pointed his finger and the long whip whizzed out. The cone-like whip head directly collided with the golden light. Bang! A wave of air exploded. The golden light shot out from the spear was instantly defeated in the air. The long whip, however, shot toward Dongfang Chang'eo like an arrow. Everyone watching was shocked by the sharpness of the whip. At the same time, they were worried for the person below. Dongfang Chang'eo raised his head and took a glance. Then he shot into the sky and swung his spear horizontally. With a ping sound, he directly knocked away the whip and raised his spear to chase after Yan Biao in the sky. The latter smiled ferociously. He raised his hand and pointed. Dongfang Chang'eo suddenly felt that something was wrong. He quickly glanced to his left and right. Suddenly he heard a whoosh sound coming from behind him. He looked back and saw that the whip that he had just knocked away was coming again. Bang! He turned around and raised his spear to knock the whip away again. But the whip was just knocked away. It bounced in the air and came back to life. In the blink of an eye, it wrapped around him again. Dongfang Chang'eo didn't have time to care about Yan Biao. He waved his spear and fought with the strange whip. On the other hand, Yan Biao, who was in the air, only needed to control the whip with ease. Dongfang Chang'eo was already at a disadvantage. If this continued, he would consume too much of his true essence. If his reaction was a little slow, he was afraid that he would be at a disadvantage. Yu Qianzhou could see that Dongfang Chang'eo wasn't really inferior to that guy. The key was that the guy's whip was too strange. It couldn't be killed or broken. It was really entangled. Dongfang Chang'eo couldn't display his strength at all. Damn it. No one knew what would happen next. Losing one more round might decide the outcome of the battle. This was related to the ownership of 1 billion yuan. I've invested 40 million yuan. I can't lose money no matter what. Yu Qianzhou frowned. He suddenly turned to Bai Shan and asked, if someone threw a treasure down the mountain and happened to be picked up by Dongfang Chang'eo, it wouldn't be against the rules, right? Bai Shan looked at him in shock. He didn't know what he meant. Chapter 392. The people at the side immediately reacted and thought of his two unusually sharp sabers. Could it be that he wanted to throw his sabers out for Dongfang Chang'eo to use? It seemed that the sabers could not be taken away by others. Bai Shan pondered for a moment and said, if someone accidentally drops something down the mountain, as long as they don't interfere with the battle, it shouldn't be considered a violation of the rules as to who picked it up and who used it. Accidentally? Yu Qianzhou looked at Bai Shan and laughed, thinking to himself that this guy really knew how to talk. Looking back at the battle site, the crackling sounds echoed in the valley. Dongfang Chang'eo was still entangled with the whip. Whether it was the spear in his hand that was sharp enough to provoke or smash, it could not hurt the whip at all. Needless to say, to be able to resist the spear in Dongfang Chang'eo's hand, this whip must be an upper-grade magical weapon. The whip was strong and flexible in the air. The head and tail of the whip coordinated with each other to attack. As soon as the tip of the whip was knocked away by the spear, the tail of the whip pierced through the air, causing Dongfang Chang'eo to be extremely busy. It was as if he was in a muddy pond, unable to escape and unable to use his strength. He did not even have the chance to fight with Yan Biao. However, it was not easy for the whip to hit Dongfang Chang'eo. At least under the situation where Dongfang Chang'eo could still sustain his energy consumption. No matter how fierce the whip's attack was, it could not get close to him. However, Yen Biao was still smiling as he looked at Dongfang Chang'ao, who was entangled with the whip. He was very leisurely making hand seals. Great! Yen Bugue and the others at the mountain top also applauded and cheered. If this continued, they would definitely win the first round. The people of the Cultivation Alliance did not look too good, especially those from supporting Xian Island. Losing the first battle would not only affect the wuxia cultivation world and supporting Xian Island, but also Dongfang Chang'ao would have to live in seclusion on supporting Xian Island for a long time. He would never be able to represent supporting Xian Island again. Hearing the arrogant shouts coming from the other side, Dongfang Chang'ao was enraged. He knew what it would mean if he lost this battle. Therefore, with a red face, he let out a loud shout, then consumed a great deal of xuanhuan to continuously shoot out a sharp golden light from the spearhead. Finally, he managed to force the snake-like whip to retreat for a while. His bloodshot eyes glared at the sky, and Dongfang Chang'ao seized the chance to quickly raise his spear and charge forward. Yen Biao was shocked. Actually, he himself was clearly aware that if he didn't rely on the sharpness of his whip, his strength would probably be much inferior to his opponent. Now that his opponent had not completely fallen into a hopeless situation, he ignored the rapid consumption of xuanhuan and escaped. He didn't have any magical treasures in his hands. Once his opponent caught up with him, wouldn't it be a dead end? He quickly made hand seals to recall the black dragon whip, and his body also quickly dodged. The golden light from Dongfang Chang'ao's spear barely brushed past his feet, and Yen Biao was immediately scared out of his wits. What a fast speed! His opponent's strength was indeed a notch higher than his. Just a little bit more and he would have lost both his feet. Yen Bugue and the others were also shocked. Since his opponent had dodged, he had already lost the chance to chase after him. The long whip had already caught up with him, and Dongfang Chang'ao was once again trapped in the shadow of the whip. He also understood that once the counterattack just now failed, his opponent would not give him a chance to suddenly get close to him again. The sudden change in the situation made the Cultivation Alliance's morale rise. They didn't expect that they would still fail, and their hearts fell to the bottom again. How could everyone not see that Dongfang Chang'ao probably had no chance to win anymore, and now it was just a battle of attrition? Countless people shook their heads in pity for Dongfang Chang'ao. He was obviously strong, but he was tormented by a whip until he couldn't use his strength. They were afraid that the outcome was already decided. Qiu Weiyuan of the 10,000 demons had been staring at the figure entangled by the whip in midair. His eyes were wide open and they were also bloodshot. His fists were clenched so tightly that there was a muffled sound, and his chest was heaving up and down violently. His opponent of many years might die in such an unjust battle. He suddenly felt that there was a stuffiness in his chest that he couldn't breathe out, and he was about to suffocate to death. He didn't know why either. The situation was grim. It's time to negotiate. Dongfang Chang'ao, you'll have to fight one more time. Yu Qianzhou pursed his lips. While everyone was watching with rapt attention, he walked out swaggeringly, and slowly walked to the side of the people from supporting Xian Island. There was still someone in the mood to stroll at this time, and it naturally attracted many people's attention. It was this guy again. Previously he went to the 10,000 demons side and this time he came to supporting Xian Island's side. What was he trying to do? Yu Qianzhou didn't say anything. The mountain was a little sloped, and he stood under the eyes of the people from supporting Xian Island, silently watching Dongfang Chang'ao brandishing his long whip. The people from supporting Xian Island looked at each other, not knowing what this guy was doing here at this time. Quan Deming was currently the representative here and he couldn't help but ask, Yu Qianzhou, what's the matter? Ah. Yu Qianzhou looked back in a daze and then looked left and right as if he had accidentally walked here. He immediately walked up and moved to Quan Deming's side, cupped his fist slightly and said, Elder Quan, I have something to ask. I noticed that Elder Dongfang's strength is obviously stronger than Yen Biao, but his spear is restrained by that long whip. I have something I don't understand. Don't you have any treasures that can break this long whip? If you do, why not throw it into the battlefield now? As long as you don't interfere with the duel, it won't be against the rules. Quan Deming turned around to look at the two consecrators behind him and frowned. I don't know what this whip is made of, but it's soft and not strenuous at all. It's not something that can be countered by ordinary treasures, unless there's an exceptionally sharp treasure that can break it in one fell swoop. It's not that our supporting Xian Island doesn't have such treasures, but they aren't in our hands at the moment, and it's too late to go back and get them. At this point, Quan Deming suddenly stopped talking, and everyone from supporting Xian Island also looked at Yu Qianzhou. Speaking of the sharpness of treasures, who had seen a treasure sharper than Yu Qianzhou's sabers? Even the sword of the Luo sect master was easily cut into 3 pieces, so it shouldn't be a problem to deal with this whip. Everyone's eyes lit up, but they immediately remembered that not everyone could pick up the sabers. Dongfang Chang'ao had also tried, but he couldn't pick it up at all. Thinking about it was a waste of time and everyone shook their heads in regret. Yu Qianqiu nodded and he rubbed his chin as he muttered, "Speaking of spears, I do have a treasure spear here. Although it's not as strong as my sabers, its sharpness isn't inferior to the sabers, and it might even be better. I just don't know if it can break this long whip." He wasn't afraid that people from other sects would hear him, because if someone released their divine senses to listen in, they would be discovered by supporting Xian Island. His words were no less than a sweet bait and everyone's eyes lit up. There was actually a treasure spear that was sharper than his sabers, so how could it not break the long whip? Quan Deming was astounded and he asked, "Yu Qianqiu, is what you said true?" Yu Qianqiu silently turned around and he frowned, "Elder Quan, this isn't the first time we've met, so when have you seen me lie?" His tone was a little unhappy. "That's not what I meant." Quan Deming explained, "What I meant was, can you take out your treasure spear and let us take a look at it?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the situation of the battle, and he reckoned that Dongfang Chang'ao would be able to hold on for a while longer. Thus he shook his head and sighed, "Sigh. I have a few good treasures with me and they were all given to me by a senior. He once told me that unless it's an emergency, I can't simply show these treasures to others, and I can't give them to others to use without permission. I've already promised him, so it's not convenient for me to break my promise. May I know which senior it is? Why don't you tell us? Perhaps he has a good relationship with supporting Xian Island," Quan Deming said. "He has been in seclusion for many years, so I'm afraid you won't know him." Yu Qianqiu thought of a person and he casually made up a story, Nanming Old Ancestor. While Quan Deming was still thinking, the 2 consecrators at the end of the tribulation passing stage behind him exclaimed, "What? It's him?" Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. *CK. I've blown my trumpet. There's really someone in supporting Xian Island who knows Nanming Old Ancestor? Quan Deming turned around and bowed, "Consecrators, is there really such a person? Why haven't I heard of him before?" Jin Yin said with a solemn expression, "It's normal that you haven't heard of him. This person was a person from over 1,000 years ago, and he was a wandering cultivator who hid in the cultivation world. Over 1,000 years ago, when the sect leader of supporting Xian Island went out for a tour, he coincidentally met an expert at the end of the tribulation passing stage. Not only was this person's cultivation level profound, but he was also a top-notch expert in smithing. His smithing skills were simply extraordinary and wonderful. Sect leader Ren wanted to befriend him, but the other party was unwilling to acknowledge him. In the end, sect leader Ren asked for his name, but the other party only said, Nanming Old Ancestor, and left. After that, supporting Xian Island sent people to secretly investigate this Nanming Old Ancestor. But it's a pity that we didn't have the chance to meet him again." "That's right." Fan Benlei nodded and said, "Most people don't even know about this. I've only seen it in the secret records of Nurturing Heart Pavilion." According to sect leader Ren's description, with the smithing skills of that Nanming Old Ancestor, it shouldn't be difficult for him to forge a treasure spear. But this was already a matter from over 1,000 years ago. If this person is really still alive, then wouldn't he be over 1,000 years old? When everyone heard this, they immediately thought of a possibility. If that person was still alive, wouldn't his cultivation level have already reached the legendary soul formation stage? Think about it, even if Yu Qianqiu was spouting nonsense, it couldn't be so coincidental. Putting aside the fact that the name was the same, to be able to take out such a treasure, wouldn't it coincide with the secret of Nanming Old Ancestor being a smithing expert? Like I said, I've only heard of this Nanming Old Ancestor from He Li. How could you possibly know him? Yu Qianqiu's brows moved slightly and he suddenly sighed and said, "Your sect leader Ren really missed the opportunity to meet Nanming Old Ancestor. This Nanming Old Ancestor, he loves spirit stones. If supporting Xian Island's sect leader Ren could lure him with spirit stones, it wouldn't be difficult to make him stay on your supporting Xian Island. So, he did give me some treasures, but it's a pity that he forced me to search for spirit stones for him. I'm really worried to death." If Nanming Old Ancestor really heard this, he would probably jump in anger. "Who said I love spirit stones? I don't even know who you Yu Qianqiu are. When did I force you to search for spirit stones?" Chapter 393. Ancestor Nanming liked spirit stones? The people of supporting Immortals Island finally understood why Yu Qianqiu and the purple-clothed lady were so frantically accumulating wealth after their appearance. It turned out that there was an inside story. Jin Yin and Fan Benlei looked at each other. While Yu Qianqiu was looking at the duel in midair, they gave Quan Deming a look. Quan Deming nodded his head in understanding. He turned to Yu Qianqiu and said, Yu Qianqiu, can we borrow that spear for a while? Yu Qianqiu paused and said with some difficulty, I know what you mean. You want to borrow the spear for Elder Dongfang to use, but I promised Ancestor Nanming that I can't easily take out the treasures he bestowed, and I can't let others use them without permission. Otherwise it's very likely that he will take them back. Elder Quan, you have to know that I'm prepared to use these treasures to save my life at a critical moment. If they were to be taken back, what would I do when I encounter danger in the future? Most importantly, I've always kept my promises. You guys better think of another way. We can pay spirit stones to rent it from Ancestor Nanming. What do you think? Quan Deming said. Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly and said, Elder Quan, it's not that I don't want to promise you, but Ancestor is at the ends of the earth. Even if you rent it from him, I'm afraid that by the time you get the news that he agrees, it'll be too late. Do you think it's still necessary? Can you make this decision on behalf of Ancestor Nanming? Quan Deming asked. Meh. Yu Qianqiu pointed at himself and then fell silent. He seemed to be thinking about something in the silence. After a while, he nodded, but then he shook his head and said, As long as there are spirit stones, I can make the decision. But you guys don't know Ancestor Nanming's character. He won't care about a small amount. His appetite is a little big. It was unknown whether he was feeling guilty when he said this. Was it the Nanming ancestor whom he had never met that had a huge appetite, or was it him who had a huge appetite? Quan Deming glanced at Dongfang Chang'eo, who was fighting in grief and indignation. With a firm expression he said, Name a number that the Nanming ancestor can accept. As long as it's not too outrageous, we won't make things difficult for you. The greatest significance of supporting Immortal Island's first appearance was not to win spirit stones, but to save face. For the number one sect in the world, reputation was sometimes more important than spirit stones. Ze and the people from the four major clans were no longer in the mood to watch the fight. From time to time they would look at the people from supporting Xian Island. They didn't know what Yu Qianqiu was doing with the people from supporting Xian Island. He kept talking non-stop. As for Bai Zitsong and the other three who were standing at the back, their gazes often stopped on the graceful silhouette of the lady in purple in front of them, sinking deeper and deeper. Yuan Jiokue from the Six Paths Demon Sect had questioned the disciple who was beaten yesterday, but that disciple refused to admit that he spat on Yu Qianqiu. As a result, Yuan Jiokue's hateful gaze couldn't leave Yu Qianqiu today. Now that he had finished visiting the 10,000 demons side, he went to the supporting Xian Island side. At first, he thought that this kid was really capable to be able to win over both the righteous and demonic sections. But now he felt that something was wrong. Yuan Jiokue looked at the scene doubtfully. Dongfang Chang'eo was in imminent danger, but the people from supporting Xian Island were busy chatting with Yu Qianqiu. Even the two consecrators in the final stage of the tribulation-passing realm were hitting on him. This was like seeing a ghost. Could it be that supporting Xian Island wasn't worried about Dongfang Chang'eo's safety at all? Impossible. Dongfang Chang'eo represented the face of supporting Xian Island. This huge doubt made Yuan Jiokue feel as if he had been enlightened. He couldn't help but regret his impulsive actions yesterday. Supporting Xian Island and the 10,000 demons were not kind people. Since the two sects and Yu Qianqiu were so accommodating, they must know something that others didn't. It seemed like he had to spend more effort to investigate. Otherwise it would be too late to regret when he suffered a loss. Yu Qianqiu lowered his head and pondered when he heard this. He thought to himself, I've played hard to get, so I'm not going to play anymore? Not only will they not believe me, they will also say that I'm greedy. It's not good to play too much. It'll be bad if I lose everything. So he let out a sigh and nodded solemnly. Okay. Since Elder Quan has already put it this way, I'll brace up my courage and make a decision on behalf of Ancestor Nanming. A fixed price of 50 million high-grade spiritual stones is really the lowest I can go. Ancestor Nanming really won't be interested in anything less than this. You can decide for yourselves. It would cost 50 million just to rent it. Even if supporting Immortal Island saved up this amount of money, it would still take many years. The people of supporting Xian Island looked at each other, but they couldn't delay any longer. Dongfang Chang'eo's safety and supporting Xian Island's face were worth more than 50 million. Jin Yin said in a deep voice, Yu Qianqiu, I promise you on behalf of supporting Xian Island. However, I have to say something first. What if the spear isn't as sharp as you said and we make a mistake? I've never lied. Is Senior doubting my credibility? Fine, I'll risk the treasure being taken back by ancestor Nanming. I'll say this here. If the spear's sharpness isn't what I said, you don't have to give me a single spiritual stone. Yu Qianzhou's face was full of righteousness, and his words were filled with awe-inspiring righteousness. Jin Yan nodded. All right, it's settled then. However, we don't have that many spiritual stones on us, so we'll have to temporarily. Oh, Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and interrupted him. It's fine to give it to you after the matter is over. I've been on supporting Xian Island for so many years, so I have some confidence in supporting Xian Island. However, I have to make it clear in advance that the spear can't be used by you indefinitely. It's only for Elder Dongfang's match. Supporting Xian Island had never thought of taking his things. Moreover, since Yu Qianzhou was so straightforward, Jin Yan immediately agreed. All right, let's use the spear. I have to remind everyone that Ancestor Nanming is afraid that people will pry into the secrets of the treasures he refined, so he set up extremely powerful restrictions on them. I've asked him to set up the same restrictions on my 2 treasured sabers, so you must not use your divine senses to check them. Once your divine senses come into contact with them, they'll be immediately damaged, Yu Qianzhou warned. Everyone from supporting Xian Island was astonished. It turned out that the reason why the 2 sabers could hurt people's divine senses was because of the restrictions. There was actually such a powerful restriction in this world. That Ancestor Nanming really wasn't someone an ordinary person could compare to. After everyone agreed, Yu Qianzhou put his hand into his storage bag. After searching for a while, he suddenly muttered strangely, "Could it be that I forgot to bring it with me? That's impossible." When everyone heard this, they almost fainted. After wasting so much time talking, he actually said that he forgot to bring it with him. Jin Yan's face was ashen as he said, "Yu Qianzhou, are you kidding me? Look carefully." I found it, Yu Qianzhou shouted. He didn't mean to dawdle, but the huge sabers that he made with his black flames were a little too crude. This time, since he was pretending to be the spear refined by Ancestor Nanming, he naturally had to look like a treasure spear. Otherwise, if they were all crudely made, it would be strange if they didn't suspect that they came from the same family. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to fool them even if he wanted to. Thus, after some preparation, he put his hand into his storage bag and used his black flames to carefully suppress it. That was why he spent some time. Everyone from supporting Xian Island's gaze followed Yu Qianzhou's hand as it slowly moved. This action instantly attracted the attention of everyone on the surrounding mountains. What were those fellows from supporting Xian Island doing? Dongfang Chang'ao was fighting with his life on the line. Could it be that they still had the mood to do something else? The spear's tail that was slowly pulled out was black. It was formed by 2 malevolent beast claws, and the fine scales on the claws were vivid and lifelike. The spear's tail had just been revealed when a terrifying feeling of deterrence emanated from the storage bag. Yu Qianzhou suddenly pulled out the spear and casually inserted it into the ground beside him. With a "pu" sound, even the spear's tail could easily be inserted into the mountain rocks. The spear's body was about 2 meters long, and it was completely black. The spear's shaft was as thick as a child's arm, and it looked like it was covered in scales. Upon closer inspection, it turned out that there were 9 angry dragon carvings baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. They looked as if they were about to leap out of the spear's shaft. From the front, the spear's blade looked like a flat dragon head opening its mouth and roaring angrily at the sky. The spear's blade had broken through the dragon's fangs and emerged from the dragon's open mouth. On top of the original 2-meter-long spear's body, there was a sharp edge that was half a meter long. The center of the spear bulged out while the edges were thin, and it even carried a dense barb. The spear's entire body was pitch black, and it didn't reflect any light in the sunlight. It was truly a mystery what it had been forged from. The moment this spear appeared, the people from supporting Xian Island felt like they had to retreat before even trying it out, and they couldn't help but gasp. Needless to say, just this meticulous carving and this concealed aura meant that this was undoubtedly a treasured spear. The people standing closer to the spear could clearly see the fierce spearhead and were left speechless. Those farther away were also trying to figure it out. Yu Qianzhou examined the spear's design and was very satisfied with it. In his rush just now, he had recalled the image of the red dragon in Twilight Valley and applied it to this spear. As expected, the spear's aura was extraordinary. How could he not praise such a masterpiece? Yu Qianzhou coughed and solemnly said, "When this spear first took shape, someone used it to kill a 9,000-year-old flood dragon that was on the verge of ascending. Afterwards, the South Bright ancestor placed 9 dragons on the spear's body, calling it the dragon-slaying spear. The dragon slayer who used this spear once praised that the supreme cultivator's treasured spear slays dragons. No one in the world dares to disobey, and the heavenly sword does not appear. The dragon-slaying spear? This spear once slaughtered a flood dragon that was on the verge of ascending. Fan Benlei said in disbelief. The people from supporting Xian Island also stared at the spear, and Jin Yen asked in shock, "The heavenly sword does not appear, and who can contend with it? Does this mean that there is another heavenly spear that can contend with the dragon-slaying spear?" That heavenly sword refers to the heavenly sword, not the spear, but it's also incredibly sharp, Yu Qianzhou somewhat awkwardly explained. He thought to himself, I can't talk nonsense anymore. If I continue, Great Hero Jin will be so angry that he transmigrates to settle the score with me. He quickly changed the topic and said, Everyone, shouldn't you quickly hand the spear over to Elder Dongfang? If we continue to talk, I'm afraid there will be a problem. Everyone was shocked when they heard this. Only now did they remember that they were only looking at the spear, and they neglected the desperate Dongfang Chang'eo. Jin Yen and Fan Benlei nodded at Quan Deming at the same time. Quan Deming grabbed the spear and instantly felt a bone-piercing cold. He couldn't help but praise, good spear. Everyone stepped aside and Quan Deming walked out with the spear in hand. He transmitted his voice to Dongfang Chang'eo, Elder Dongfang, don't panic. We have already found you the peerless godly weapon, dragon-slaying spear. It will definitely be able to break that strange whip. You must remember the restriction on this spear is extremely powerful. As long as you don't use your divine sense to check, you will definitely be able to use it safely. Chapter 394. Dongfang Chang'eo, who was trying his best to deal with Quan Deming, took the opportunity to take a glance. When he saw that Quan Deming was indeed holding a black spear in his hand, his spirit was lifted, but he was a little confused. He was good at using spears, so he paid more attention to all kinds of good spears. Where did the dragon-slaying spear come from? Why hadn't he heard of it before? When Yen Bugui saw the spear in Quan Deming's hand, his expression changed immediately. He could guess what was going to happen next. He transmitted a message to Yen Biao, Be careful, Mr. Yen. Supporting Xian Island is going to send a spear into the battlefield. This spear might be able to break Mr.'s whip. You must not let it fall into the hands of Dongfang Chang'eo. Yen Biao stopped in midair. Although he looked relaxed, he didn't dare to get too close to Dongfang Chang'eo. He was constantly on guard, afraid that Dongfang Chang'eo would launch another sneak attack. He was really shocked just now. When he heard Yen Bugui's telepathic message, he looked towards the direction of supporting Immortals Island. As expected, there was someone holding a black spear. He couldn't help but smile and reply to Yen Bugui, Palace Master Yen is worrying too much. The black dragon whip in our hands is made from a flood dragon that had cultivated for thousands of years. He extracted its tendons, peeled its scales, and refined its bones. How can it be broken by ordinary treasures? Yen Bugui saw that this guy was underestimating his enemy, so he reminded him again, supporting Xian Island is not comparable to ordinary sections. The golden source spear in Dongfang Chang'eo's hands is also an upper-grade treasure. It's just that Mr.'s black dragon whip is able to restrain it. Now that they are taking out something to replace the golden source spear, it's definitely not an ordinary treasure. Mr., you must not be careless. Yen Biao was alert. The two people in the air were looking at the spear in Quan Deming's hand. All the sects also saw some clues and knew that supporting Xian Island had brought out a powerful treasure. Quan Deming looked at the position and transmitted a message, Elder Dongfang, get ready to pick up the spear. After saying that, he threw the spear. A black shadow drew an arc and landed on a protruding boulder at the bottom of the valley. The black spear was inserted into the rock at an oblique angle. There was almost no sound, only the black end of the spear was exposed. All the sects were shocked. It was indeed a treasured spear. Dongfang Chang'eo, who was fighting, was slightly delighted, while Yen Biao was slightly startled. Both of them immediately locked onto that gun. Hi! Dongfang Chang'eo shouted. He had waited for so long in order to think of a way. Now that his fellow sect members had come out to save him with a treasure, success or failure would all depend on the spear below. How could he not give it his all? The spear in his hand shot out 100 spear shadows with all his might. Golden light shone as he forced the black dragon whip away. In a flash he quickly descended. Dongfang, don't run! Yen Biao shouted. At this time he was also a little anxious. He made a hand seal and the black dragon whip chased after Dongfang Chang'eo. Everyone's eyes were focused on the battle between the two. They knew that this was the crucial moment. About 100 meters above the ground, the sound of wind breaking could be heard. Dongfang Chang'eo suddenly stopped, turned around, and used all his strength to shake off the long whip with his spear. Everyone thought that he would be able to pick up the spear below. Unexpectedly, he raised his head and looked at Yan Biao, who was rushing down, and shouted, "Kill!" Then he raised the golden origin spear and rushed towards Yan Biao. His imposing manner was incomparably valiant. The two of them rushed at each other and their speed seemed to close in an instant. Yan Biao originally wanted to use the long whip to entangle Dongfang Chang'eo so that he could keep the spear below to avoid any worries. Who knew that Dongfang Chang'eo would turn around and rush back, as if he had set up a trap for him to fall into. The sharp sound of the golden spear pierced through the air, and Yan Biao was almost scared out of his wits. He hurriedly turned around to escape, but it seemed that it was still a little too late. The two of them had already met, and following a cold snort from Dongfang Chang'eo, the golden spear drew out a rain of blood. "Ah!" Yan Biao screamed. One of his thighs was not able to dodge in time, and was cut off on the spot. The Cultivation Alliance immediately cheered, especially Qiu Wuyuan of 10,000 Demons, who was unusually loud and excited. Yu Qianxia nodded slightly. This Dongfang Chang'eo was indeed Dongfang Chang'eo. As long as he was given a chance, he could immediately turn the situation around. This kind of wisdom and courage was definitely not comparable to ordinary people. It was no wonder that he could take on such a heavy responsibility in the world's #1 sect, Fuxian Island. Although Yan Biao had lost a leg, his life was still more important. He continued to run for his life, but his vitality was greatly injured, and his speed was already a lot slower. He desperately ran towards the direction of Yan Bugui and the others, shouting loudly, "Two senior brothers, save me!" Among the dozens of people, 2 people immediately rushed out to rescue him. Yan Bugui anxiously shouted, "Don't break the rules." But someone beside him pulled his arm. The 2 people could not care so much now. Their junior brother was about to die, who would care about the rules? At worst they could just admit defeat. However, the scene that the 2 of them were most worried about still appeared. Dongfang Chang'eo had already caught up to Yan Biao. His expression was as calm as still water, and he raised his spear above Yan Biao's head. The 2 of them immediately shouted, "Show mercy!" Yan Biao turned around in horror, only to see a ray of golden light flying towards him. Dongfang Chang'eo had just used the spear 3 times, and his movements were clean and neat. He was indeed someone who had used the spear for a long time. "Ah!" A few pieces of minced meat and blood fell to the ground accompanied by a shrill scream. Yan Biao was finished. The Cultivation Alliance once again cheered non-stop. "Junior brother!" The 2 people who were rushing over exclaimed. The 2 people raised their hands and pulled out whips that were exactly the same as Yan Biao's. Dongfang Chang'eo turned around and left, landing on the ground at the fastest speed. Not far away he saw the ownerless long black whip lying quietly on the ground. He raised his hand and grabbed it, then directly threw it into his storage bag. This could be considered as his spoils of war. Seeing that the 2 people who pulled the whips were picking up the pieces of Yan Biao's body, he looked at the broken leg in front of him. He was afraid that the other party would not let this go so easily. Dongfang Chang'eo first took out an energy recovery pill and swallowed it. At the same time he stuffed the golden origin spear in his hand into his storage bag. He turned around and grabbed the black spear handle on the boulder behind him. As he grabbed it, his eyes slightly widened. He suddenly pulled out the black dragon slayer spear that was stuck on the boulder and raised it to take a closer look. The long spear was cold and pitch black. The dragon claw held the spear spine, and the 9 dragons roaming spear was like a raging dragon spitting out cold blades. The entire spear was almost covered by the fine scales of the dragon, and it looked extraordinary. In particular, there seemed to be a huge amount of power contained within it. That kind of terrifying power seemed familiar. Dongfang Chang'eo looked at the fellow sect members of supporting Xian Island in surprise. He had never heard of such a spear in the sect. If there was one, it would have been given to him long ago. He reckoned that it would not have dragged on until now. "Elder Dongfang, you have won the first round. The 2 consecrators have summoned you back." Dongfang Chang'eo suddenly received a voice transmission from Quan Deming. He nodded slightly and flew back to the people of supporting Xian Island in a flash. The surroundings were filled with cheers. The Cultivation Alliance had won the first round, and all the sects were cheering. "Elder Dongfang is indeed amazing. Yu Qianqiu praised happily. This really made him overjoyed. He had not even used the spear and he had already earned 50 million. Even if he lost in the end he could still earn 10 million. If he had known earlier he would not have spent 40 million. Dongfang Chang'eo was startled. Why was this guy here? He nodded and did not say anything. However, Yu Qianqiu stretched out his hand and said, Elder Dongfang, please return the Dragon Slayer spear to me. The spear is yours? Dongfang Chang'eo looked at the fellow sect members in surprise. Finally his eyes fell on Quan Deming. The latter nodded silently and said, I borrowed it from Yu Qianqiu for emergencies. I promised him that I would return it to him after one round. This. Dongfang Chang'eo's eyes lingered on the spear. He was a little reluctant to part with it. After a little hesitation he said decisively, Yu Qianqiu, are you selling this spear? Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, No. I won't sell it no matter how much money you give me. Elder Dongfang, please return the spear to me. At this moment someone in the valley suddenly shouted, Middle stage tribulation passing cultivator, Yan Fang is here to accept the challenge. Dongfang Chang'o, do you dare to come down and fight me? Everyone from supporting Xian Island looked over. It was none other than one of Yan Biao's senior brothers. It seemed like he wanted to take revenge. Dongfang Chang'eo snorted and turned to Yu Qianqiu and said, Yu Qianqiu, lend me the spear for one more round. I will return it to you after I use it. Chang'eo. Jinyan stopped him and shook his head. Supporting Xian Island has to fight for the first round. Since we have already won, let the other sects do the rest. Supporting Xian Island only needs to make a move at the crucial moment. Dongfang Chang'eo stopped and pondered. He knew that the sects had their own considerations. He could not control his own impulse. He looked at the people at the foot of the mountain and gritted his teeth as he handed the Dragon Slayer spear in his hand to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu took it and touched it before stuffing it into his storage bag. He bowed to Jinyan and said, After the challenge ends I will come back to find you. Jinyan nodded with a gloomy expression. Just touching the spear had cost supporting Immortal Island 50 million. If he had known that Dongfang Chang'eo would kill like that, he would have just thrown something as a trigger. There was no need to waste so much money. Yu Qianqiu did not care so much. After leaving supporting Xian Island he went back to the four families. Ziyi popped her head over and asked curiously, I saw it just now. The gun that was thrown down seems to have been taken out by you? Yu Qianqiu looked at her. It was good to have a high cultivation. So many people were blocking and yet she saw it. Actually, it was not just Ziyi who saw it. Many people saw it. Even if they did not see it, they would have guessed it. If supporting Xian Island really had a spear, they would have taken it out long ago. There was no need to surround him and take out a spear. If it was not his, who else could it be? Yan Biao's senior apprentice brother was still shouting, What? Dongfang Chang'eo does not dare to come out, but the whole Chinese cultivation world does not dare to come out? Are you all cowards? Who will fight me? He shouted and scolded for a long time, but no one from the sects came out. The key was that everyone knew how powerful the whip was from Dongfang Chang'eo's battle. Those with the same cultivation as Dongfang Chang'eo would not be able to deal with it better. And the cultivators in the final stage of tribulation passing couldn't come out because of the rules. For a moment, people from the sects looked at each other. That whip was troublesome. Yu Qianqiu looked left and right for a long time. Seeing that everyone was still hesitating, he could not help but laugh. Since everyone is so polite, I won't be polite. Ziyi's eyes brightened. You want to go up? His fighting style was always so novel. She liked watching it. What do you think? We can't let people laugh at us Chinese cultivation world for not having anyone. Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched as he drew a machete in each hand and shouted, I'm coming. Chapter 395. To shout like that at this time, it would be the center of attention. Bai Shan still wanted to persuade him, but it was too late. A silhouette dashed down the mountain. He didn't fly but rather he leaped. Holding two knives bigger than a human, he fanned himself and rushed down the mountain like a bat, his movements extremely fast. Although the crowd did not see clearly who it was, who else could it be other than Yu Qianqiu who came from the four great families and held such strange knives? All the sects looked at each other, speechless, and felt a little ashamed. So many sects, but no one came out to fight, forcing a guy who could not fly to run and jump down to fight. How could they not feel ashamed? They were afraid that they would not be able to avoid a round of humiliation. Yan Fang's junior brother died, and he wanted to find someone to vent his anger, but he did not expect that the one who came to challenge him was a guy who could not even fly and looked very young. He was stunned for a moment, then laughed and said, "Is there no one in China?" "Ah, a young man, I don't kill nameless people. Seeing that your courage is commendable, I will spare your life. Quickly go back and call your elders." "You don't know me, what a joke." Xianxia's eyes lit up, he did not stop and directly rushed over. "Be careful." Yan Bugui suddenly shouted from the top of the mountain. The stumbling Xianxia ran all the way down and was already close to Yan Fang. Yan Fang still did not know the opponent's background and was still laughing. Hearing the warning, Yan Fang looked around and saw that the young man who rushed over did not say anything, but raised his knife and slashed at him. His movements were quite smooth. Yan Fang sneered disdainfully, waved the whip in his hand to block and said in a deep voice, "It seems that I have to kill a nameless person today." His voice stopped abruptly. The black knife waved and the snake-like black whip was cut into two. Yan Fang felt his neck cold and his eyes opened wide in disbelief, but his vision had changed, and he saw his chin on the cold and wide knife. The young man did not hesitate to wave the other knife, and split a headless body in half, and his vision gradually blurred. The whole place was silent. Even the sound of the wind seemed to have quietened down. Only the words of the young man with the saber could be heard. Xianxia stood with his saber in front of him, looking at the head that had died with its eyes wide open. He said expressionlessly, "So what if he's famous or not? One saber is enough." With a twist of the blade, the head fell off. Xianxia quickly went over to take the storage bag from the corpse and put it away. Then he turned around and ran back up the mountain with the two broadswords. What was the point of staying here if he didn't run after the fight? Safety first. When Xianxia ran back to the four great clans and put away the two sabers, everyone still felt as if they were in a dream. Running down just like that, chopping people down with one slash, then running back and it was over just like that? Junior brother? A sorrowful howl came from the mountain where Yan Bugui was. The last of the three brothers landed in a flash. Good? The people of the Cultivation Alliance reacted, and immediately cheered loudly. When had they ever seen such a classic battle? Going down the mountain only needed one slash to cut off the head of a mid-stage tribulation passing expert, and then turning back it only took a moment. It was so cool that they had no words to say. Especially the last sentence. So what if he's famous or not? One saber is enough. It pushed everyone's emotions to a climax. The applause was explosive and Ziyi, who was stunned and then came back to her senses, kept clapping. Looking at the people around her, her face showed a smile that had never been seen before. Elder Bai's disciple was really extraordinary. Everyone's eyes were focused on Xianxia. Xianxia came out in a straightforward manner, cupped his fists and bowed to the people around him saying, I was lucky, I was lucky." What he got in return was even more intense cheers. A consecrator from the 10,000 demons was called Nyo Senator. He looked at Xianxia, and suddenly said to Xuanhuan in a deep voice, "Xuanhuan, he originally wanted to join the 10,000 demons, but you chased him away. After this is over, you can go and ask Xianxia if he is still willing to join the 10,000 demons." Xuanhuan nodded speechlessly. The people from the supporting Immortals Island were even more amazed, shaking their heads and smiling bitterly. This guy was just wandering around here. How did he come back with a saber in the blink of an eye and kill an expert in the middle stage of the crossing calamity stage? Dongfang Chang'eo recalled the scene of Xianxia cutting off the long whip with a saber and sighed, "This saber is really extraordinary. I wonder how does that spear compare to it?" In fact, everyone understood that the reason why Xianxia was able to kill with a saber was because the other party was careless and didn't know his background. He didn't expect that his whip could be easily cut off, so he lost his life. But for the Cultivation Alliance, this was something to gain face, so everyone was equally excited. They were right to think this way, but they didn't think about it. If it was an ordinary person, who would dare to use a saber to kill someone in the crossing calamity stage with a nascent soul stage cultivation? In fact, Xianxia also thought that he would have to go through a lot of trouble, but he didn't expect that the other party didn't know him, so he made a decision in the blink of an eye: kill him. People who can make such a prompt decision are not as easy as they say or think. An old man in embroidered clothes stood next to Yan Bugui. He had been staring at the purple clothes next to Xianxia, and suddenly asked, "Is the person with the saber Xianxia that man who mentioned? Who else could it be other than that rascal?" Yan Bugui stared at Xianxia and said with hatred, "Yan Fang really underestimated his enemy too much. He was actually defeated so easily." It's not necessarily because Yan Fang underestimated his enemy. If it were me, I'm afraid I would also have made a mistake. It's the first time I've seen such a brave young man, no wonder he's so famous. The old man in embroidered clothes looked at Yu Qianzhou's eyes, revealing a sense of admiration, and asked, I heard that this Yu Qianzhou also defeated the head of China's Daluo sect, Luo Qingtian. Didn't you investigate his background? We did, but there's no way to find out. After this guy was expelled from Fuxin Island, he rarely appeared in the cultivation world. No one knows where he is, but he appeared again recently. Yan Bugui said. He disappeared for a period of time, but now he appears again, and he even has a treasure that ordinary people can't have? The old man in embroidered clothes looked at the purple clothes, then looked at Yu Qianzhou and nodded thoughtfully. I'm afraid it's not that simple. Murderer, state your name. After the eldest senior martial brother collected his junior martial brother's corpse, he pointed at Yu Qianzhou and shouted, Mid-stage tribulation passing cultivator, Yan Cheng accepts the challenge, who dares to fight. This was clearly telling Yu Qianzhou to go down and fight him. Damn it. With so many people watching, you want me to go down just because you tell me to? Dongfang Chang'ao also killed your junior martial brother, why are you only looking for me? Am I easy to bully? Yu Qianzhou looked down expressionlessly, pretending that he didn't hear anything. In his heart he was thinking that Fuxin Island wouldn't give up just like that, and they might even have to rent his spear. I was stupid just now, I can earn money for free, why should I go down and do such a sinful thing? A bunch of cowards. Yan Qing was so angry that he started cursing, and the more he cursed, the uglier it became. The more people heard, the uglier their faces became. Think about it, there were so many people here and there were many people who were stronger than Yan Qing, but no one came out to fight. This was really embarrassing. The key was that the opponent's whip was too powerful. Although they won the first 2 rounds, even if they asked Dongfang Chang'ao to go up, it would still be difficult for them to beat him. At the end of the day, no sect would be like Yu Qianzhou, running around with precious treasures. At present, they could only deal with the treasures in Yu Qianzhou's hands. Otherwise, they couldn't let Yu Qianzhou wait until they returned to their sects to pick out suitable treasures before they started fighting. The cursing was still going on, but no one came out to fight. Time was also passing, and if no one came out to fight after 2 hours, Yan Bugui would take the initiative to win. Not only would they get 1 billion spirit stones, they would also be able to damage the reputation of the Chinese cultivation world. At this moment, the 10,000 demons' faces were the ugliest. The leader of the righteous sects, Fuxin Island, had won the first round, but as the leader of the evil sects, the 10,000 demons, there was no response at all. After they returned, the prestige of the 10,000 demons in the evil sects would definitely plummet. Xuanhuan was now a little uneasy and restless. He wasn't confident that he could deal with that strange whip, and if he didn't fight, how would the 10,000 demons face their fellow evil sects in the future? His restlessness fell into Yan Bugui's eyes, and a trace of bitterness flashed across Yan Bugui's face. He gritted his teeth and sent a telepathic message to Yan Qing, who was below. The person who killed your junior brother is called Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou? Yan Qing suddenly pointed his finger and shouted, You coward, is Yu Qianzhou? Yu Qianzhou was slightly stunned. *CK. Who told him? He immediately looked around, looking for any suspicious people. He believed that Yan Bugui's side, seeing that victory was in sight and that they were about to reap rich benefits, would definitely not reveal his name and let Yan Qing curse him. Instead, it was very likely that someone on his side was hoping that he would fight, so his name was leaked. His first thought was that he had been betrayed by someone on his side, but in the end, every sect he looked at was suspicious. Forcing me? The more it is like this, the more I won't go. Yu Qianzhou was a little angry. But Yan Qing obviously had some understanding of Yu Qianzhou's name, as he said all kinds of nasty things. Things like disrespecting his masters, betraying one sect after another as a double surname slave. This challenge had become a war of words. All the sects looked at Yu Qianzhou, wondering how long could he endure it? Ziyi stared at the people below with a frosty face. It was fine if it was just 1 or 2 sentences, but if he continued to endure it, he wouldn't be able to show his face in the future. Yu Qianzhou finally couldn't listen to it anymore. With a livid face, he stepped forward and shouted, How dare you shout at me? Are you tired of living? Are you courting death? Yu Qianzhou, come down and fight if you have the guts. Yan Qing pointed his finger and shouted, Since you're tired of living, I'll send you down there to accompany your 2 junior brothers. After Yu Qianzhou finished speaking in a cold tone, he waved his hand and a green flying sword flashed out from his sleeve, quickly carrying him into the sky. In the sky, he waved his 2 sleeves continuously, and streams of green light flew out continuously. The two sleeves were like storage bags and no one knew how many flying swords were hidden in them. 1,000 flying swords danced in the sky, and the imposing manner was really shocking. Xianxia kept his sleeves. So far, with his current cultivation, controlling 1,000 flying swords at the same time was already his limit. Moreover, the green fire element in his body was almost depleted, and even if he wanted to release more swords, he couldn't release more. Chapter 396. The sunlight refracted the green shadows, and the green light flowed endlessly, covering the entire valley, causing the entire valley to sink into a hazy green light. Everyone squinted their eyes at the piercing green light, but they still couldn't conceal their shock. Rumor had it that there was an extraordinary person in the ancient times who could control 10,000 swords at the same time. The rumor was not to be believed, but now everyone had witnessed Xianxia releasing 1,000 flying swords in a fit of rage. They danced in the air and looked at the vast land like a tiger, wanting to take someone's life. Xianxia was dumbfounded as he looked up. He subconsciously felt that he had stirred up a hornet's nest. Yen Bugui and the rest looked at each other, then at Xianxia who was coldly staring down from the sky. They all had an expression of disbelief. The people of supporting Immortals Island looked at each other. Guiyuan sword technique, 1,000 swords control. Xianxia, do you know your crime? Xianxia's cold voice descended from the sky and reverberated in the valley. The flying swords above his head all stopped. The dazzling green blades slowly adjusted their direction and stared at Xianxia below. The black flame machete was able to take someone's life with a single slash. It was impossible for it to happen again. This time he sent out all the green flame flying swords that he could control. He wanted to have a fair and square battle, to let the entire cultivation world know of his abilities and that he did not rely on luck to establish himself. A nascent soul cultivator was actually questioning a tribulation passing stage cultivator with such a matter-of-fact tone. Everyone was speechless. They didn't know if Xianxia could withstand the power of the 1,000 swords. It seemed that these green flying swords were not ordinary flying swords. If it was them. Thinking of the scene of 1,000 flying swords shooting at them at the same time, everyone subconsciously shivered. Ziyi's gaze lingered on the 1,000 flying swords. Her pretty face was filled with excitement. She clenched her fists tightly. From Xianxia's domineering aura, she seemed to see the shadow of Senior Bai. The faces of the 4 major families were filled with solemn respect. The disciple of the old ancestor was not angry, but once he was angry he would shake the world. What crime did I commit? Xianxia smacked his lips and asked dryly. His tone had changed from cursing and arrogant to cautious. When it came to life and death, it was strength that determined the opponent's attitude. Who told you my name? Xianxia glanced at the surrounding mountains and changed the topic. The moment he said that, the various sects started sizing each other up. In fact, everyone had the same suspicion as Xianxia. Yen Bugui snorted coldly and transmitted his voice to Xianxia. Mr. Yen, you don't have to hesitate. You can tell him that I told you. He had a grudge against Xianxia, so why would he care about one more dish? Although it didn't matter if he said it, how could Xianxia give him up? If he really did that, it wouldn't be a matter of him losing face, but his teacher who lived far away in Xiushui country would lose face with him. Thinking of his teacher who had reached the soul formation stage, Xianxia's confidence was boosted. He shouldn't be scared by his pretense. No matter how strong a nascent soul cultivator was, how strong could he be? So he waved his whip and shouted, Xianxia, if you want to fight then fight. Don't be so long-winded. At the end of the day he still didn't have enough confidence. Otherwise, he would have made a move long ago and wouldn't have been so long-winded. You really don't know what's good for you. In my eyes, that lousy whip of yours is no different from withered grass and rotten wood. Xianxia shook his head and raised his hand. I have 1,000 flying swords waiting for you. If you have the cultivation of the final stage of the tribulation passing stage, you might be able to escape from my 1,000 flying swords with your teleportation. Unfortunately, you're not. I'll give you one more chance to live. Tell me the person who said my name and cut off your own tongue. Then I'll let you go. Otherwise, you won't be able to see tomorrow's sunrise. After the battle with Luo Qingtian last time, Luo Qingtian's abnormal speed was so fast that even the flying swords couldn't catch up to him. It could be said that Xianxia had gained some experience. This time, the flying swords of blue fire were waiting for him in battle. They weren't afraid that Xianxia would escape to the sky. Presumptuous. Xianxia shouted loudly. His protective upstanding qi instantly surged out from his body and wrapped around himself. The long whip in his hand rose high into the air and shot towards Yu Qianqiu like a spiritual snake. "You're courting death." Yu Qianqiu sneered. He pointed with his finger and dozens of streaks of green light flashed out. Like a jackdaw fighting for food, they surrounded the long whip and tossed it around wildly. Even though the flying swords of blue fire were not as good as the flying swords of blue fire, they were still first-rate sharp. Yan Qing and his two brothers had encountered their nemesis when they encountered Yu Qianqiu. When the black dragon whip and the flying swords of blue fire clashed, it was already pecked all over. The others didn't know, but Yan Qing immediately sensed it. In his great shock, he made a hand gesture. The black dragon whip made a bam sound and swung its tail in the air. It shook off Guisher's flying swords of blue fire. It turned around and was about to fly back. Yu Qianqiu sneered. If there was only one flying sword of blue fire, perhaps it wouldn't be able to do anything to you. However, there were 1,000 of them here. A small whip could escape to the heavens. The sword gesture was activated. Dozens of flying swords had already cut off the whip's path of retreat. A group of ferocious fellows pounced forward and pecked wildly. It was practically a standard gang fight. Yan Qing's face was filled with anxiety. The black dragon whip was the weapon that he had relied on to make his name. Once it was destroyed, it would be easier said than done to find another treasured weapon that was just as handy. His hand gesture was almost a mirage. The whip scurried everywhere in midair. It dodged left and right, shook its head and swung its tail. However, Yu Qianqiu's nimbleness in controlling the flying swords was not inferior to his control of the whip. Once the black dragon whip shook off Guisher's flying swords, there would be flying swords that were ready to pounce on Guisher's head, peck at his tail, and pinch at his waist. There was no way for him to escape. He did not allow the whip to escape. He pestered it relentlessly and wrapped it tightly. The divine whip that was previously feared by all the sects was now in such a sorry state. It had no way to escape. Everyone was speechless when they saw this. The people of supporting Immortals Island looked at each other again and again. Ever since Yu Qianqiu had used the guiyuan sword technique on supporting Immortals Island, everyone had actually studied this sword technique in detail. However, the conclusion that everyone had reached was that it was gaudy. They all felt that it was not practical. Now that 1,000 swords had appeared, just this imposing manner alone was already extraordinary. If they could achieve the effect of Yu Qianqiu's usage, even if the quality of the flying swords was not as good as this green flying sword, imagine if someone was entangled by 1,000 flying swords and ganged up on, just like how this whip was entangled. Apart from a few people who possessed great cultivation base, how many people could escape easily? Moreover, Yu Qianqiu's cultivation base was only at the nascent soul stage. If it was a cultivator at the crossing calamity stage who was controlling it, what kind of consequences would there be? Just thinking about it made people feel expectant. They were guarding the treasured sword technique left behind by their ancestors without realizing it. Everyone had made an error of judgment. The people of supporting Immortals Island suddenly came to their senses and nodded silently at each other. They decided that when they returned to the sect, they would definitely report this matter to the sect leader. They had to pay attention to the guiyuan sword technique. Yan Qing was still trying his best to make hand seals, attempting to use his last effort to save the black dragon whip. However, under the watchful eyes of everyone, the sharp tail of the whip, which was either refined from a beast horn or a beast tooth, suddenly broke off from the long whip. A few green rays chased after it and stabbed it a few times. When they realized that it was useless, they immediately flashed back to join the group and continued to attack the long black thing. The fang-like tail of the whip fell to the ground sadly. However, it was just the beginning. With it leading the way, the broken whip followed in its footsteps. Yan Qing felt like crying but had no tears. He stopped making hand seals and the black dragon whip was dismembered just like that. The victorious green rays seemed to be a little unsatisfied. They flew around in the air for a while. When there was really no target to attack, they obediently returned to their sword positions. When the various sects witnessed this scene, they were speechless. Such a fierce sword technique was simply unheard of and unseen. Today was an eye-opener for them. When everyone looked at Yu Qianqiu again, their gazes were much more solemn. In the past, when they heard that Yu Qianqiu defeated Luo Qingtian, many people did not see it with their own eyes. They thought that it was because of the sharpness of the treasure and luck. Now, everyone clearly saw the word, strength. Although the outcome of this battle had not been decided, Yu Qianqiu had such a powerful and outstanding sword technique. There was no doubt that he should have a place in the cultivation world. The contemptuous gazes of the various sects had disappeared. From today onwards, they would look at this young man with a rather bad reputation. Ziyi's eyes were full of splendor. She watched with relish. It seemed that no matter when or who Yu Qianqiu fought, she would not be very worried. Because of her blind worship of Bai Changchun, she had already thought that Elder Bai's disciple should be like this. Yanqing looked around a little gloomily. Thousands of flying swords were floating in the valley, ready to attack from all angles, aiming at him inside the protective aura. The Cyan sword net completely surrounded him. At this moment, whether it was the Cultivation Alliance or Yan Bugui and the others, when they saw this scene in the valley, they all felt a little ashamed for Yanqing. A tribulation-passing cultivator fighting with a nascent soul cultivator was actually trapped to the point that he could not move an inch. It was simply a joke. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Yan Bugui, who was on the top of the mountain, and smiled faintly at Yanqing. Although you were the one who provoked me, I have always been a kind person. You are the only one left out of the three of you. I can't bear to kill you. If you kneel down and beg for mercy, I can spare your life. As soon as he said this, several cold snorts came from Yan Bugui's side, echoing in the valley. It could be seen that the person who made the sound had a very high cultivation. That group of people stared at Yu Qianqiu like knives. Yanqing was representing them. If he knelt down and admitted defeat, he would not only lose face, but Yan Bugui and the others who took the initiative to challenge him would also be completely disgraced. This was just like if someone from the Cultivation Alliance knelt down and admitted defeat, then the face that the Huaxia cultivation world would be lost even if they wanted to in the future. The people from the Cultivation Alliance also secretly clicked their tongues, thinking that Yu Qianqiu had really gone too far by saying such words. But they didn't know that Yu Qianqiu had other considerations. There were rules in the challenge. If one party admitted defeat, the other party could not kill again. He provoked them with words because he wanted to cut off the other party's way of admitting defeat, and then kill them. He never thought that letting his opponent live was a good thing. Since he had decided to use this battle to earn a name in the cultivation world, then the experience from his previous life told him that it was often more effective to win people over with virtue than to have a fierce reputation. As long as he stood firm, he could slowly accumulate virtue and do good in the future. Sure enough, when Yanqing heard this, he immediately flew into a rage. He pointed his finger and shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, don't be so arrogant. You want to force me to beg for mercy and admit defeat with just a flying sword? What a joke." Clang. As soon as he finished speaking, he saw a green light hit his protective vigor chi like lightning. The protective vigor chi was not damaged at all, and the green light quickly returned to its place. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said with a smile, "Sure enough, you have something to rely on, no wonder. But today I will let you foreign cultivators learn a lesson. How can the Huaxia cultivation world be a place where you can mess around?" Chapter 397. Hearing this, Yan Bugui was silent, but some of the people around him were livid. The Cultivation Alliance naturally applauded. Yanqing snorted coldly. Relying on his protective gang chi, he forcefully knocked away the flying swords that stopped around him, and quickly rushed towards the direction of Yan Bugui and the others. His intention was obvious. As long as he left the valley, he would lose, and the opponent would not chase him anymore. This was the best way to save his life after failing the challenge. Yu Qianqiu sneered. Sure enough, as I expected, everyone wants to live when they are in danger. You want to run away like this? Fortunately, I planned it first. Otherwise, if you admit defeat in public, I will have to stop. Everyone also saw Yanqing's intention. He did not admit defeat verbally, but he wanted to escape. He wanted to save his life, but he did not want to lose too much face. Next, it was up to Yu Qianqiu to make him stay. To everyone's surprise, the flying swords all over the valley did not carry out a fierce attack. Hundreds of flying swords moved with Yanqing, waiting for the right moment, and the remaining hundreds of swords wrapped around the protective gang chi that was escaping. Looking from a distance, it looked like a cactus or a hedgehog flying. Yu Qianqiu stopped in midair, arms crossed in front of his chest, and stared expressionlessly at the spiked ball. Everyone did not know what he was going to do. Yanqing, who was hiding in the protective gang chi, also felt a little surprised. The opponent did not attack forcefully. Although this was good, it made people feel inexplicably uneasy. His worry was right. Yu Qianqiu would not let him go like this. Just as he felt uneasy and sped up to escape, a scorching heat suddenly came from outside his protective upstanding chi. The protective upstanding chi that was connected to his mind almost collapsed in an instant, but the flying swords outside forced him to resist it with brute force. Everyone was surprised to find that Yanqing had stopped in the air. Could it be that he suddenly came to his senses and wanted to fight with Xianxia for the sake of his dignity? Yan Bugui and the rest looked at each other, not knowing what Yan Qing was trying to do. Glancing at Xianxia, they realized that he was sneering at them with malicious intentions. Suddenly they felt that something was amiss. Several voice transmissions rang out in Yan Cheng's ears, asking him what exactly was going on. However, he was currently in a difficult situation, and was circulating his energy to resist with all his might. The scorching heat seemed to be teasing him. When he was just able to adapt a little, the temperature immediately rose a little. When he was barely able to adapt, the temperature rose again. It seemed that it would not let go until he was forced to use his protective upstanding qi. However, he had no treasures in his hands now. Once he left the protective upstanding qi and faced the 1,000 flying swords outside, he would die. Yan Cheng's eyes were red, his skin was bright red, and his 7 orifices were bleeding. Finally, he could no longer bear such torment. He made the same move as the Daluo sect master Luo Qingtian, self-destructing his protective aura shield. Bang! Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, a loud noise sounded out of thin air. The spiky ball wrapped by the green flying swords was instantly blown into pieces. The airflow surged and a figure quickly sprang out from it. He wanted to take advantage of the impact of the explosion to scatter the flying swords and quickly escape. However, there were only a few hundred flying swords that were blown away by the explosion. The remaining few hundred were already prepared and waiting for him. As soon as Yan Qing sprang out, hundreds of green cold lights immediately broke through the turbulent airflow and shot towards him from all directions like lightning. Yan Qing was able to cultivate to the middle stage of crossing calamity, so he was not completely useless. Without the burden of the protective aura shield, when he saw the group of flying swords attacking him, he also went all out. He immediately struck out his palms in all directions like shadows. Bang bang bang. He slapped out a powerful force, knocking away the flying swords that were attacking him. He forcefully resisted the first round of attacks with his profound cultivation base. However, there were too many flying swords. Even the green flying swords that were blown away by his self-detonation of the protective aura shield also swept towards him again. Everyone was silent. Looking at the situation, they knew that this master in the middle stage of crossing calamity was making a futile last-ditch struggle. He forcibly consumed his cultivation base to resist, but he could not move an inch. How long could he resist like this? Although they did not know what method Xianxia used to force him to self-detonate his protective aura shield, since he had arranged everything step by step, they were afraid that he did not intend to let him go. After all, there were too many flying swords. Finally, there was a streak of cyan cold light that slipped through the net. Yan Qing, who was already bleeding from his 7 apertures, suddenly felt a chill on his back. His body fiercely trembled, and after a slight ferocious expression, an inexplicable sorrow flashed across his face. He saw with his own eyes that a cyan blade had drilled out of his chest, bringing with it a bright red flower of blood. Yan Qing used all his strength to slap a few times and shouted at Xianxia in a shrill voice, "Xianxia, even if I become a ghost, I will not let you go." His mournful voice reverberated endlessly in the valley. It was no wonder that he would say such resentful words. After he died, the deaths of his 3 fellow apprentices were inextricably linked to Xianxia. How could he not hate? All of a sudden, thousands of flying swords stopped in the air and did not continue to attack. Everyone was surprised. Was this guy going to show mercy? While they were puzzled, they heard Xianxia say indifferently, "Even if I become a ghost, you will not let me go." What a joke. I hope you can cultivate until the end of the Ghost King after you become a ghost. Otherwise you are not even qualified to see me. I have a word of advice for you. After you become a ghost, you should peacefully reincarnate as a human. This conversation puzzled everyone, but Ze and the people of the 4 families understood. If a person became a ghost, his resentment would be too strong. It was possible that he would not enter the underworld and stay in the human world. However, the yang qi in the human world was too strong. It was not something that a little ghost who had just become a ghost cultivator could bear. He was afraid that his soul would disappear soon. Even if he could barely survive, how could the cultivators of the human world let a ghost cultivator stay in the human world? The Taoist protector would definitely kill him. At present, the only place suitable for ghost cultivators to cultivate was the demon ghost realm, which gathered yin qi. However, if they wanted to find trouble with Xianxia in the demon ghost realm, with Xianxia's identity in the demon ghost realm, it would be a joke if it was not. As soon as he finished speaking, the green light flashed and the swords swarmed to snatch it. In exchange, A shrill scream was drowned in the bloodthirsty green light in the blink of an eye. As the blood mist spread in the air, a few pieces of ragged clothes were also chased by the green light and turned into dust. Everyone gasped. Not only was this sword technique powerful and fierce, but it was also abnormally vicious. It actually turned Yancheng's bones into dust. Not even a piece of his remains was left. The people of supporting Immortals Island looked at each other firmly again. The Guiyuan sword technique could actually be so fierce. It was really a top-notch sword technique for killing enemies. As the smell of blood spread, Yu Qianzhou frowned slightly. He opened his arms and thousands of cold lights were summoned. They split into 2 green torrents and returned. In the blink of an eye, all of them were absorbed into his sleeves. Immediately, Yu Qianzhou's figure flashed, and he quickly returned to the front of the 4 families on his sword. As soon as he landed, the green light under his feet also nimbly flicked into his sleeves. The blood mist in the air was blown away by a gust of wind. Ziyi looked at Yu Qianzhou, who had returned victorious, and clapped her hands excitedly. The applause was abrupt. The atmosphere on the side of the Cultivation Alliance also recovered from the depressing atmosphere. When they remembered that they had won again, they immediately cheered again. However, everyone seemed to have lost the passion from before. The applause and cheers were much more reserved. Everyone looked at Yu Qianzhou with a more complicated expression. From today onwards, no sect would dare to look down on this person. Senior Chang, why didn't you let me shout for Yancheng just now? At least he could have saved his life. Yan Bugui asked the old man in embroidered robes beside him. Just now, Yancheng was in a precarious situation. When he was about to shout for help, he was stopped by the old man. The old man in embroidered robes replied with a faint smile, "Palace Master Yan, you are now representing the cultivation world of each country. How can you say something like admitting defeat? This explanation is too far-fetched. If I can't say it, can't you say it too? Who knows what you are planning?" Yan Bugui frowned and didn't say anything. The old man in embroidered robes seemed to have seen through his thoughts. He said with a smile, "Although Yanji of Xiushui country's rumor sect can't personally come to the cultivation world of China, he has a junior brother named Xuanhuan. His cultivation level is quite high. He has reached the peak of the final stage of tribulation passing. It is said that he has reached the beginning of the soul formation stage. If Yanji knew that all 3 of his disciples died here, he would definitely ask his junior brother to come here. Palace Master Yan, do you think it's worth it to exchange the life of a cultivator in the middle stage of tribulation passing for an expert who is close to the soul formation stage?" Yan Bugui pondered for a moment and said with a voice transmission, "An expert who is close to the soul formation stage? Senior Chang, didn't you say that the world's most powerful cultivator forbade any soul formation stage cultivators to come to the cultivation world of China? If we really attract this expert, will it provoke the world's most powerful cultivator to intervene?" No, although Yin Huan's cultivation level is high, he has not reached the soul formation stage. He is not restricted. The old man in embroidered robes' face twitched. "Who is the world's most powerful cultivator? Have you seen him before, Senior Chang?" Yen Bugui asked with a voice transmission. To be honest, a year ago, Yen Bugui had always thought that soul formation stage cultivators were legendary figures who probably didn't exist in reality. However, in his most critical moment, a group of disciples of soul formation stage cultivators suddenly came to his rescue. This was simply unbelievable. After the incident, both sides reached an agreement to use each other. He also understood the purpose of these people's visit. However, what he was most curious about was what kind of person the legendary world's most powerful cultivator was. How could he make so many soul formation stage cultivators hesitate and really not dare to take a step into China? This was a little unimaginable. He had asked these people more than once, but no one was willing to tell him in detail. It was as if this world's most powerful cultivator was a taboo in everyone's mouth. Hearing this, the old man in embroidered robes went into a trance. That time he begged his master to take him to the East Sea to see the world. At the time, his master didn't think it was a big deal, so he brought him along. Who knew what happened in the end? It was simply chilling. That person brazenly forced all the soul formation stage cultivators in the world to swear a poison oath. In the end, because he was slightly unhappy, he attacked. After being humiliated, 16 top-level cultivators joined forces to fight to the death, but they all died in the hands of that person. That light green-robed figure was like a nightmare. Whenever he closed his eyes, he would remember that person's cultivation level was so terrifying that he couldn't even imagine it in his dreams. Palace Master Yin, that kind of person is not someone we should be concerned about. Let's take care of the matter in front of us. The old man in embroidered robes said with a changing expression. None of them told the Yin father and son that the reason why the soul formation stage cultivators didn't come was because they were forced to swear a poison oath. There were two reasons why they didn't say it. The first was because they were afraid that the Yin father and son would be scared. The second was because no one would say that their master had been humiliated. Yin Bugue grunted and slightly nodded his head. Out of the corner of his eyes, he caught a slight trace of fear on the old man's face. In his heart, he made up his mind to find a way to understand this world's most powerful cultivator. Otherwise, when the time comes, he wouldn't know he had suffered a loss. You're tuning into the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.